sends a corner blitz.
No
and
flag.
It comes free. He waited all game to send the most exotic pressure.
Okay, Mahomes do it. Got the P-Ryan. P-Ryan makes the move around Bernard, and that will clinch it.
You can call it a whatever you want. Three chief, a Chief Pete, whatever it is. They're about to head to New Orleans to explore the opportunity to reach a level that's never been seen before, Tony, in the history of the NFL. A chance at 3 consecutive Super Bowl titles.
That's what it sounded like yesterday on CBS alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. Yes, I am surprised to see myself here today as well. We'll explain that as we go along.
What are you doing here?
Yep. It's a surprise to everybody involved, and I know there are many of you that are not particularly excited about it given what happened yesterday in the Chiefs versus the Bills game. But we're here to explore it all, and we can't wait to do so. T-Bone is most excited of the three of us to be in the studio today. Again, we can explain that as we go along throughout the day today. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show, and you can always check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. The Chiefs going back to the Super Bowl. They know nothing different.
Okay.
With Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback, they have at least reached the AFC Championship game every single season, and now they are going for the opportunity to win their third consecutive Super Bowl. Alex, to me, what yesterday was about was Patrick Mahomes once again peaking at the exact right time. Mahomes didn't have a great season by his own standards. Josh Allen did have a great season by anybody's standards. Lamar Jackson, great season by anybody's standards. What sets Patrick Mahomes apart is that he uses the regular season, and I can't believe we reached this point, but he uses the regular season to figure out, what are my answers? What are my answers to the questions that could be presented to me in the postseason? And I'll be damned if he didn't figure it out by the end of the year. That first drive by the Chiefs set the tone for that game yesterday. And honestly, the first drive by the Bills also set the tone for the game. That was ultimately what decided this thing, because the Bills were really freaking good yesterday, man. You are not going to hear me come on here and talk any type of crap about the Bills today. That team was awesome. And if they had beat the Chiefs yesterday, they would have been a deserving champion of the AFC, and I would have picked them to beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. That team is awesome. That quarterback played his ass off yesterday. But guess what? He wasn't perfect. And when you play against Patrick Mahomes and this version of the Kansas City Chiefs, as much as it is annoying as hell, and I totally understand it, if you are somebody that here today does not want to hear about it, I get it, man. But it is hard to ignore how good this team is in the biggest possible moments. Late in that game, Spags was spectacular. Trent McDuffie made the play that they had to have at the exact right time. Xavier Worthy steps up. Big third down, guess what it is? 15-87. Got to convert, got to have it, boom, going through. How about the kicker, Harrison Butker? It's not a huge kick, like not a 50-plus yarder this time around. The dude's been perfect in the postseason this year, was perfect in the postseason last year, 90% on field goals in his postseason career. They just come up with the exact right play at the exact right time. Happened once again yesterday. That's why they're headed to their third Super Bowl in the past 3 seasons.
Yeah, look, I mean, everybody knows that I will come on here and bash on this Chiefs team as much as possible because, frankly, I like seeing BK sad, and I was rooting for that last night. But you have to respect greatness. And I'm talking about greatness on both sides because I thought Josh Allen was incredible in that game. The difference, you weren't perfect. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs were perfect. And frankly, I earned so much more respect for Kansas City after that game. And I hate saying this, but I've never gotten to see legitimate three-peat from start to finish. And I don't know if it's going to end this way. Frankly, I think the Chiefs are the better team than the Eagles in this Super Bowl. But watching what Patrick Mahomes did in that game against Buffalo, because to me, he was a different quarterback in that game. Typically, it's the Patrick Mahomes that's under pressure. He's making these sidearm throws while he's running sideways. And you're like, how the bleep did this guy just pull that off? You know, Patrick Mahomes has never rushed for 2 touchdowns in one playoff game.
One game, period.
One game, yeah. I mean,
at any point in his career.
And so last night, the Bills are throwing everything they can at this guy. And I'm thinking, yeah, he's not going to be able to handle this type of pressure. He's not going to be able to pull the sidearms. No, he didn't have to. Because when the other teams adjust to him, he adjusts to the other teams. And that's why you saw the 2 running touchdowns by Patrick Mahomes. That was a all-timer for me in a playoff game, and it's right underneath the other Bills and Chiefs AFC Championship game where they just went toe-to-toe in the final 90 seconds. You saw two supreme teams go at it in the AFC. One had to lose. I feel for Josh Allen, but you have to respect greatness when you see what just took place. And that's what the Kansas City Chiefs are right now.
So you mentioned his touchdown run. It was a designed run, which is a rarity. Yeah. You do not see that from the Kansas City Chiefs. He dislocated his kneecap. His knee was on sideways at the bottom of a pile against the Denver Broncos, and everybody thought the Chiefs' season was over at that point. He did go on to win the Super Bowl that year, by the way, in 2019.
We didn't need that.
In the 5 years since, he has had exactly 3 designed quarterback runs. One was a 4th and 2 while trailing in overtime of the Super Bowl. Another one was on 4th and 1 last night. And the third one, that touchdown run that he had. The Chiefs opened up the playbook yesterday in a way that they rarely do. They had stuff that they had to call out of necessity, not because it was, I think it's the right call at the right time. No. We got to go to this. It's the only answer we have to the problems that are being presented to us. And that's a freaking credit to the Bills, dude, that they had to go into that bag. He had more designed runs last night than he had in the previous 5 years combined. That is an amazing accomplishment by the Buffalo Bills. And that's why this game is so freaking cool every year, dude. It is such a great series that we are getting to see. And yes, I am somebody that gets to enjoy it probably more than most nationally because I root for the team that keeps on winning these damn things.
I don't think Donnie agrees.
So that's part of it.
Someone needs to check on our boy Donnie.
There will come a point in time where even Donnie can look back and say, and it's probably the next time that the Bills beat the Chiefs, and we'll talk about this later on. I think that's coming eventually. But Donnie will eventually look back at this. Yes, Bills fans will eventually look back at this and say, it was pretty freaking cool that our team was a part of that. Our team was the one that pushed that team that nobody beat to the brink. Not once, not twice, but multiple times in the postseason. And, dude, they get the best out of the Chiefs. There's nobody else that pushes Patrick Mahomes the way that Josh Allen pushes Patrick Mahomes. You look back at this series, QBR is a metric that I really like, Alex, because it takes into account sacks and interceptions, and it takes into account the rushing yardage as well and how successful you are on the ground. It's on a scale of 0 to 100, right? 100 is there's never been a better quarterback performance than what we just witnessed. 0 is this is the worst quarterback performance we've ever seen. Patrick Mahomes' QBR in his 4 playoff matchups against Josh Allen. 94, 97, 92, 87. On average, he has a 93rd percentile QBR against the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. Now, Josh Allen against the Chiefs has been awesome. 52 in the first one, but since then, 92, 66, 71 last night. Those are really good numbers for the playoffs. Really good numbers, especially against a Steve Spagnuolo-led defense. Ask Tom Brady how that tends to go. And it's not enough. Because the guy that he's going up against is doing something unlike anything we've ever seen, yes, in the history of the sport. And we get to watch it right now. And I get to watch it as a fan, which is really cool, don't get me wrong. But we all get to witness it. And 20 years from now, you'll be able to tell your kids and your grandkids and so forth, I watched the greatest to ever do it, and I was able to see the prime of what it looked like when the greatest football player that ever played was going up against a team that pushed him in a way that nobody else could or would. T-Bone, what'd you take away from last night as you were sober?
Well, that
was in the Philadelphia game, so I don't know if he remembers the Kansas City one.
His voice.
Yeah, no, you're going to hear T-Bone do a lot of this today.
First off, great speech over there. Made me really want to root for the Eagles.
I get it.
That's impossible for me, which is odd.
I hate the Chiefs. Watching them win last night, I hated it. Every moment of it. Even then, when they brought out that freaking read option, I looked at, I think it was Stoltz, and I went, dude, did they just run a bleeping read option with Patrick Mahomes? But, dude, I respect the hell out of what they're doing, right? Because they do stuff so flawlessly. They go deep into the playbook when they go against the Buffalo Bills. And I think BK mentioned this, I think it was on Friday's show. You know, they don't play sexy football. Nothing about last night's win was sexy, but it's just smart. They take care of the football, and they just methodically take what you give them. And that's what they've consistently done throughout this run. And when you go up against the Kansas City Chiefs, you're not going to beat them with skill. Like, let's just be honest. You're not going to beat them with skill. You've got to play a perfect football game. And the Bills didn't play a perfect football game. Now, they didn't make many mistakes. Like, their first drive was one of their flaws. Allen got off to a shaky start early on. And that was really the end of that football game for them. And then, of course, the drop for Kincaid on that 4th down play. Now, little tough catch, but it's a catch you got to make, right?
Sure.
When you play the Kansas City Chiefs, you've got to convert on a 4th down play when the ball hits your hands.
And on that point,
And that's what happened.
Allen was a little jittery early on.
Yeah.
He had those 2 throws that both could have been intercepted. Neither was. And credit to them for continuing to maintain. But that first drive, as he shows up and he's just a little off, just looks a little jittery early on. Man, that drive was huge.
Yeah.
You look back on it, it's like that's a 1-score game, and it could have made all the difference in the world because he did settle in. And I thought Josh Allen was really good yesterday, but it was too little too late. And when you're going against the Chiefs, and specifically that dude that you're going up against on the other side, you cannot have those lapses.
Well, and you
one drive could be it.
You look at the 2 2-point conversions, too, that they were able to or they failed to convert on.
100%.
Like, those are 2 difference makers because at the time at halftime, you're looking at making the game a tied football game. And then, of course, in the third quarter, you're looking for an opportunity to extend the lead. And in both circumstances, you were unable to score in that defining moment of the game.
Josh Allen and the Bills yesterday. Now, people get annoyed by this. I get annoyed with it, honestly. But it's a technicality in the box score. Turnovers on downs do not count as a turnover. It's not a giveaway in the game, right? That is only like interceptions, fumbles, etc. So the Bills did not have a turnover yesterday in the game, technically speaking. NFL teams entered yesterday 92-3 over the past 45 years in the playoffs when they scored at least 28 points and did not turn the football over. 92-3. The Bills have now lost that way twice to the Kansas City Chiefs in the past 5 years. Twice in the playoffs. The 13-second game was the first time back in 2022, and then last night they lost that way. 28-plus points, 0 turnovers in the game. Lost that way twice. The rest of the NFL combined has lost that way twice in the last 45 years.
You know what? Hearing those numbers,
brutal, dude. It is so brutal.
You said Donnie, even Donnie will look back. You know, Bills fans look back on this 20 years. They'll remember the good. They'll remember this. You know, they'll remember watching to go. They're still gonna hate it. Yeah. They're still gonna hate it. Yeah. 20 years from now, don't care. They're gonna hate it.
They'll hate it, but there will be some amount of them. I think maybe I'm wrong on this. I could be wrong. But my personal perspective on this, because I saw a lot of Chiefs teams that lost to Brady, right? It's cool to be a part of the story. It sucks that you were on the losing side of it, but you're the only team that really pushed him. Like, Stalter's a Falcons fan. If the Falcons had more than just that one Super Bowl, if that had happened like 4 different times in the Super Bowl, there would be a part of Stalter now, I believe today, that would be like, man, we pushed that mother believer.
I saw Stoltz yesterday. Trust me when I say this, he's still upset.
I get it.
Still not happy.
Yeah,
he's letting his anger out on Dan
It's one of those things that, again, I hate. Like, I like Andy Reid. I like Travis Kelce. I despise looking at Patrick Mahomes and hearing him open his lips. But it's like I'm watching that last night and I'm going, I have to respect it. Because as much as I hate that team, I always have to find reasons to hate them. Because the officials are throwing flags. Well, guess what? That was a game that the officials had no influence on. Because... Okay. Well,
you just said the thing that's going to make people real
probably,
mad.
But I mean, I can.
All right, coming up.
I can complain about it all I want. That was a game where I can't blame the officials in this one. But, like, you have to find reasons to hate them. That was a game to where you look at it and you're like, man, I'm sorry. As much as I want to hate this team, it was an impressive run that they did because you did it against what Josh Allen had been his best in his entire career.
The Bills are the first team in NFL history to win 11 games or more in 5 straight years without making a Super Bowl in any of those seasons. Only teams to do it 4 consecutive years were the 95-98 49ers. They had gone to the Super Bowl in 94 right before that run. And then the 2000 to 2003 Eagles with, of course, Andy Reid as their head coach. They made the Super Bowl in 2004. So typically, you get this sandwiched with at some point before or after a Super Bowl appearance. We'll see if the Bills are eventually able to break through. But for now, the Chiefs looking for the first three-peat in the NFL in the Super Bowl era, looking to become the first team overall to end up getting a three-peat in North American professional sports since the 2000s Lakers, 2000 to 2002. Before that, you got to go back to the Yankees of the late 90s.
And I remember those 2000 Lakers, and that was a hell of a time to watch.
Hell of a game last night. We'll be talking about it a lot throughout the day today. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. YouTube is available for you at youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. Coming up next, we do got to talk about the Eagles, who are the other team that are going to be represented in the Super Bowl this year. They just rode their running game all the way to the Super Bowl. Alex, Saquon Barkley, clearly the best player, most important player on the Eagles, right? Mm-hmm. When was the last team that a team had a running back as its best and most important player all the way to the Super Bowl? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. Big game last night between the Chiefs and the Bills. Another one between the Eagles and the Commanders. It sets us up for a super big game, Alex, a week from this Sunday. And we've got the Chiefs going up against the Eagles. I like the Chiefs. No surprise here. Minus the 1.5 points. That's where we're at right now. The over-under set at 49.5. If you bet $100 on that game, that parlay, 2 legs over on the Circa Sports app in the state of Illinois, you win $265. If you place the exact same bet, though, Alex, on FanDuel, you only get $235. You win more money when you win with Circa Sports in Illinois.
All right, enough of this Chiefs crap, BK. We're going to go to the hockey side of things because I'm going to give people a parlay thanks to Circa Sports tonight because we talk about those tight money line splits. Well, right now, the Blues plus 119 to pick up a victory tonight against the Vancouver Canucks. You go anywhere else, that's sitting at plus 110. You get the best odds, tight money line splits, not limiting you based off of your winnings. All of that over at Circa Sports Illinois. So get those bets laid down today. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Here's Barkley, a little shovel, looking for an edge, gets it, Saquon Barkley, first down, Barkley, oh, Saquon, touchdown, there it is, fly Eagles fly to Super Bowl 59.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, that's what it sounded like yesterday on Fox as the Philadelphia Eagles, unfortunately for basically everybody watching, end up defeating the Washington Commanders in a game really after the first 25 minutes or so that never felt close. The Commanders just made too many mistakes. The Eagles were the better team. They were the team that was more prepared to win a game like that. The best player on the Eagles, nobody would argue it, is Saquon Barkley. He's not only the best player, though, he's also the most important player on their roster. And Alex, it's a pretty rare circumstance for a team to have a running back that fits both of those criteria, best and most important. Some would argue last year for the 49ers, Christian McCaffrey fits into that criteria. You could make the argument. You could also make the argument for like 7 other guys, like Trent Williams, unbelievable left tackle. You go to the defensive side of the ball. You want to go with Bosa? Sure, go ahead. Put him onto that criteria. You want to go with Fred Warner? Go ahead. Yeah, put him on that criteria. At that point in time, if you wanted Ayuk or George Kittle or any of the other Super Bowl, like creme de la creme type of a player, you could have gone with him as well. So I think it was at least up in the air, although it's a fair argument that you could make on Christian McCaffrey last year. If you reject the notion that he was this, I think you have to go back all the way to 2006, Alex, for the last time that we saw a player that fits this kind of criteria. And that was Shaun Alexander for the Seattle Seahawks. And I think that it's so symbolic of where we're at with the NFL this year. And I think it speaks to what we all talked about all season long with both Saquon and the Eagles and the Ravens with what they were doing with Derrick Henry, and really just overall the passing numbers being down for the first 6 weeks of the season as well. The league has swung into a new direction. And this is the way that teams are winning now, is with almost a bully ball type of approach. Ravens took it, Bills took it, the Chiefs honestly took it for most of the season, and the Eagles certainly took it. What did you make of the Eagles making it out of the NFC this year and not just beating the Commanders yesterday, but imposing their will on Washington?
That's the part that I was most impressed by, because I thought Washington was going to keep things close. And when you say Washington made mistakes, it's wild because the quarterback I didn't think made mistakes. It was the special teams play that made mistakes. When you're talking about the fumble on the punt, when you're talking about the fumble from the receiver, like they made mistakes that were away from Jaden Daniels, but they made those mistakes because Philadelphia was all over them. And I despise the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think a lot of this is just my hate for Nick Sirianni, but I can't also deny what they did. I mean, Saquon going off for a 65-yard run on the first play of that game basically told you what you should be expecting from Philadelphia. They were going to impose their dominance on you. Defensively, I thought Washington would have some answers for what they were going to bring, and they didn't. So I think watching Philadelphia, one, it kind of tells you where the NFC is at, but two, it shows you that they were better than what people were giving them credit for. Agreed. And a lot of this falls on Saquon Barkley. I think Jalen Hurts was awesome in that game. Jalen Hurts hasn't been really good since last season. I think A.J. Brown emerged, but that was the first game we've really talked about A.J. Brown in this postseason run. The difference is every single game, Saquon Barkley shows up, and whatever game plan the opposition is throwing for him, he finds a way to beat that. So Philadelphia is making this run thanks to their running back, and frankly, that's the only part that I find appealing because Saquon's deserved this.
Yeah, I never thought that the Commanders could slow down Barkley enough to force Hurts to beat them. And you're right, Hurts played well, but he didn't have to beat them yesterday. It was all Barkley because the Commanders came in with the third worst rushing defense in the NFL, worst of the playoff teams. So I feared they weren't going to be able to keep pace with them, especially if they couldn't stop the run, and that's exactly what happened. And you saw the moments probably a little too big for that team. Still a pretty young team. I mean, you mentioned their fumbles. Those are mistakes that just can't happen in the playoffs, right? You lose the turnover battle in the playoffs, you're going to end up losing more than likely. You're going to end up losing the game more or less because you can't give away those extra possessions, and that's exactly what happened to the Philadelphia Eagles. They got extra possessions. Barkley dominates in the running game, and it was just easy for them.
You could tell early on. One team's just better than the other. And Washington, man, they were such an unbelievably fun story. And we all fell in love with Jaden Daniels because of how good he was this season, and deservedly so. The guy was amazing. But we talked about this while they were on this run. Man, the matchups really played into their hands. And this is not to take away anything from what Washington was able to accomplish. They had to go out there and execute, and they did. But they went up against Tampa in the first round, and Tampa wants to play that style of game. They want to get up and down. They want to play a high-scoring affair, and they don't have a defense that's going to be able to stop you. And so it's just a matter of hey, this is a track meet. Who's going to put up the most points in the end? Same thing is true of Detroit. They had one really great week defensively against the Minnesota Vikings at the end of the season, but otherwise, that defense was beat to crap. And so they couldn't get stops in that game, and it became a high-scoring affair, and the Commanders were able to force a couple of turnovers, and boom, go into the NFC Championship game. This was never going to be that style of game. Never. The Eagles don't want to play that way. Their defense is literally built to avoid those big plays, and credit to the Commanders. They still had a couple of them, but the Eagles are they're constructed in a way that Super Bowl winning teams or Super Bowl appearing teams are. They have a great offensive and defensive line. They have a defense that doesn't allow you to get the big play. They play well on special teams. They've got a quarterback that, for all of his faults, he handles the ball pretty well, and they've got a really good running game. I just can't say the same thing about the Commanders. The Commanders are not yet a well-rounded team. They'll get there, I think, and I think we're not seeing the end of the Washington Commanders. We'll talk about that more later on today, but this was about the Eagles to me. And so it becomes a question of, I saw this stat yesterday. This comes from the AP. Here's the list of coaches that have gone to 2 Super Bowls in their first 5 years as a head coach, Alex. Sean McVay, Mike Tomlin, Jimmy Johnson, Tom Flores, and Joe Gibbs. That's really a list of like the who's who of coaches in the last 60 years in the NFL. And then Nick Sirianni.
Oh.
Nick Sirianni has now added his name to that list. And Jalen Hurts has now started multiple Super Bowls in the NFL. And yet if I polled a random collection of, let's call it 100 football fans, right? Just people like you, me, and T-Bone that sit down and watch the NFL on Red Zone on a week in, week out basis. And so we see all these teams. We watch Jalen Hurts. We see the decisions that Nick Sirianni makes. If I said, hey, is Nick Sirianni a good head coach? It'd probably be about 50-50. If I said, hey, is Jalen Hurts an above average NFL quarterback? Like, rank the quarterbacks in the league. Is he better than 16th in the NFL? Probably be about 50-50. And yet they've made it to the Super Bowl twice in the last 5 seasons. Alex, what do I do with that? Are we not giving enough credit to Sirianni and Hurts because we know coach and quarterback is like the number one thing that you should point to whenever it comes to this time of the year? Or is it speaking to how unbelievably deep their roster is? Like, what do I do with this?
I think it's the second one. I can't give Nick Sirianni credit, and I know that this is probably just me and my hatred towards him. It's just kind of the face thing. But I do see the dominance that they have done over these past few years, but I look at this as certain areas that you've taken advantage on. And this year, what you've done is you've had a unbelievable Hall of Fame worthy season by Saquon Barkley. Do I think that can last? No. I mean, how often do we see a season like what Saquon Barkley's doing from a running back and then the next season be like, yep, there it is again. Christian McCaffrey's a perfect example. Yep. Like, you see it and it goes quick. And when that goes, what do they have to fall back on? Yes, they have an incredible offensive line. Can't deny that one. But I don't think Jalen Hurts is that guy that puts you above the rest. Like, we just got done talking about Josh Allen and what he's been doing. Do I think Jalen Hurts can do that consistently for a team if they're not great in other areas? No. So I not to take any credit away from him, but this kind of feels like, hey, we got to win this because I don't know what this is going to look like beyond this season. Kind of like what the 49ers just went through.
I get it, but didn't we say the last time?
Yeah.
Like, why is it different now than it was the last time that they got to the exact same spot?
They lost in the wild card to the Buccaneers the last time pretty quickly,
Last year.
and it was a beatdown.
But now they're back.
Because they got Saquon Barkley.
Sure.
See, but they didn't have Saquon 2 years ago. I don't even remember what that team that they lost when they lost to the Chiefs.
Miles Sanders was their running back.
Yeah, I was gonna say
They had an offensive line, and that's what's getting it done for them.
But that offensive line is still there, and this is why, I do have to give a little credit to Hurts and to Nick Sirianni. If I'm going to criticize last year, and I think they deserved it for what had taken place, I also have to give credit where it's due when, hey, man, yes, Saquon Barkley is the most important player on their team, no doubt. You can't hide your quarterback, and you certainly can't hide your head coach. They've got really good coordinators, credit where it's due. I think that was mostly their general manager that made those hires, but Sirianni had to say, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and make the changes that are necessary to my staff. And he did, and he empowered them to go out there and make the units into their own doing. And those units are really good, man. And Jalen Hurts, man, for all of that, we will give a ton of credit today, justifiably, to Saquon Barkley. Jalen was great yesterday. That dude played an awesome football game, both on the ground and through the air, and he did it on one leg. So I think we're being a little unfairly critical of both of those guys, because I'm with you, Alex. I still don't trust Nick Sirianni, but it's unfair of me to say that.
I mean, I think he almost blew that game against the Rams.
Yeah,
I mean, almost is almost, right?
Totally,
Like,
but
did you win the football game or not?
Totally, but they had to turn the ball over because of a decision by Nick Sirianni where they could have just ended the football game.
Yeah, but I mean, all of these coaches have bad moments, man. All of them. Even like the best coaches in the league will make mistakes when we get to this time of the year. Andy has done it. Andy makes decisions. I thought yesterday he coached a damn near perfect game, and I was shocked when he went for it on that 4th down. Absolutely shocked when he did it. But he finally got it right. And so, like, he coached a damn near perfect game yesterday, and it required all of that. But generally speaking, there are a lot of games where I leave saying, man, Andy had a couple of things where it's like, oof, is this really the right decision to make in this spot? He's not aggressive enough in general on 4th down, in my opinion. But he overcomes it, and his quarterback helps him do that, and his defense helps him do that, and Spags helps him do that. And the same thing is true of the Philadelphia Eagles and what they're doing right now. I got to give a lot of credit, man. Getting to the Super Bowl twice in a 5-year stretch is a hell of an accomplishment. And I give all the credit in the world to the 49ers when they just did it. And in between, they sucked.
Yeah.
Absolutely sucked. And I think Kyle Shanahan's the second best coach or the third best coach in the NFL right now. I got to give a little bit of credit to Nick Sirianni. And I certainly have to give a little bit of credit to Jalen Hurts as well.
I will stick by it and not be a hypocrite. They're an upgraded version of the 49ers.
That's pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah. But this is the last year. And then you're about to look at and then you're about to look at what the next couple of years look like for the 49ers.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine.
And I think Kyle Shanahan is a better coach.
Oh, I agree. I don't think that, like, Sirianni, I think it's a lot of people talk about him as if he's a bottom 10 coach in the NFL.
Oh, I'm not saying that. No.
I think he's a top half of the league coach at a minimum. And I think you could argue for more than that.
I just think this lemon has been squeezed so much that the juice isn't coming out anymore, and you might have to toss it in the trash and go to the grocery store.
In 15 minutes, we'll get to questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You guys can get some questions in on the YouTube chat as well. The Graveyard chat is available for you at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. But coming up next, so the Blues are at a crossroads again, huh? We're right back to where we started prior to that nice little stretch against the Calgary Flames. We'll talk about it, what it means for them next year on 101 ESPN.
10 Redricks New Day Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they host the Vancouver Canucks. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5:30 with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. The Joey will join Chris Garber for puck drop at 6:30. This portion update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
In Dadonov shoots it underneath the pads of Binnington. And a complete broken play finds the Dallas Stars tucking in the first goal of the game. 1-0 Dallas, 12:53 to go in the first period. Down the point on the power play. DeRope hints backdoor. They score. And once again, team's able to find a wide open guy on the back door on a penalty kill. And this time it's the Dallas Stars. Essa Lindell putting in a power play goal. 2-0 Dallas. Falk into the slot. Kyrou scoops it into the far corner, and the Blues are shut out for the first time in the season. The Dallas Stars come in on Hall of Fame night. The Blues have a tough first period. Fall behind 2-0. Solid second and third, but couldn't break through to make up for the first. And the Dallas Stars shut out the Blues. First time the Blues have been shut out this year.
One step forward, two steps back. That's been the theme for the Blues this year. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. Alex, we got excited after those 2 wins against Calgary because they were massive games. Legit playoff games against the Calgary Flames. And that's the team that you were directly competing against for that final wild card spot in the Western Conference. But since then, you have lost 3 of your last 4 games, and the one win you got, yes, credit where it is due, they won it, but it did take a shootout in overtime, or a shootout after overtime, rather, to be able to get those 2 points. So this is just a team that's not clicking on all cylinders right now. And more importantly, they're just not playing a full 60 minutes. This has been a theme for them all year long, and Alex, it feels like they are once again at a crossroads. Because you look at the standings today, and man, the Calgary Flames are once again playing some really inspired hockey. They're playing well while you're going through your struggles. And so what it amounts to is you're 5 points back. 5 points in the wild card standings. You right now are closer to the Anaheim Ducks than you are the Calgary Flames. The Anaheim Ducks are picking in the top 5 of the NHL draft as of today. That's where things stand for the St. Louis Blues. And maybe every bit as importantly, the Flames still have 2 games in hand on you. And you got to assume that they're going to get those 2 games in this scenario. So if they do, you'd be 9 points back of the Flames for the final spot in the Western Conference wildcard rankings. What do you make of where this team's at right now, Alex? What's going on?
They're in a tough spot. Their problem, and it seems after Saturday talking to Jim Montgomery, where he's referenced because he was asked about why the Dallas Stars have been able to kind of just sustain this dominance that they've had. And he said, well, look at them. Every single season, they're top 10 in scoring chances for, they're top 10 in scoring chances against. You know what you're getting on a nightly basis against that team. You don't know that with the Blues. And that's the problem that Jim Montgomery is still trying to solve with this Blues squad. Because the game the other night, I actually thought against Dallas, they were the better team in the second and third period. The problem was you had 4 minutes, 5 minutes really, when you started from puck drop that you weren't ready to play. And what did the other team do? They beat you. They beat you on 2 separate plays. So much so that Jim Montgomery had to call a timeout to get his guys mentally invested in the game. And then they take the penalty, they give up the power play goal, and there was no coming back. They missed a lot of open nets. They suffer from finishing, which we've talked a lot about this season. Their problem right now starts from internally with all of the players being ready to start the game against the other side. And that's something that we can sit here and try and do X's and O's with all day long, but it doesn't matter. You're breaking up lines on a nightly basis because you're looking for chemistry. Now you're breaking up the defensive units. I don't think it has anything to do with the players and who they're playing with. It has everything to do with the players invested in the game when it starts. And the other teams, the ones that you've lost, whether it's been Dallas, whether it's been a couple of those games following the Calgary Flames game, other team was ready to go the moment that puck dropped, then you said, we'll get there, and then you never did.
Do want to listen to a couple of quotes from after the game on Saturday night. Blues, again, lose 2-0 against the Dallas Stars. They're now 5 points, but also a couple of games in hand behind the Calgary Flames for that final spot in the wild card race. Here's Jim Montgomery on his biggest takeaway from the game.
I mean, you can't just have 2 good, decent periods. You got to have 3. We got to start on time, or you got to finish the game the right way. You know, in Vegas, thought we didn't finish the game off. So we just got to continue to build and understand the importance of game management, understand the importance of every shift is a gift mentality, so that we're, grateful for the opportunity to play in front of great Blues fans and stuff. And hopefully that creates more of an urgency within us.
So the next quote that I wanted to listen to is Braden Shin on what needs to change for the Blues to be able to get back into this thing.
Individually having yourself ready to play. It's especially this time of year. Points are crucial. Playing at home, and at the end of the day, no excuse not be ready to play, especially against good hockey teams. And that's the lesson we have to learn, and have yourself ready to play. And when that happens, the team goes.
My insides are getting a little frustrated because
I heard you go, so I wanted to hear why.
Let it out.
Because it's been the last 3 years where I've heard the players post-game and pre-game say, like, we've got to be ready and we got to be invested in this game. And there was a quote by Jim Montgomery at the end of the game the other night that really stuck in my craw a little bit, because he said, I don't know, we're going to have to change something up because it's not working right now. And so I got to thinking, well, what are you going to change up? And he was followed up. He said, I don't know, maybe we do morning skates at Centene instead of Enterprise. But then he was asked again today, and this was Jim Montgomery. We've looked at routines, everybody getting in at the same time. We've looked at as coaches spending more time in the dressing room. I'm not a big fan. I think the room is the players' area and the opportunity to communicate and own the room, but we're looking at everything. After that Calgary Flames game, you asked any of those players, and they were like, hey, we know this is a big game. It's a must-win. We need 2 points. We're in this race. And what did they do? Laid a dud. Now you're getting games to where the first period consecutively, you weren't ready to play, and the other team scored twice on you. And then afterwards, the players are saying, oh, no, we got to be ready to play. At some point, you got to stop using words and start using actions. And I think Jim Montgomery is saying, look, that's the players' locker room. That's their area, and I don't want to infiltrate it. Well, unfortunately, they're not taking an advantage of it being their area by mentally being ready to go for the game. So maybe you do need to be invested a little bit more as a coach. But that's the fine line I have to imagine by a hockey head coach, because the moment you step over a boundary, the players start to get frustrated and you lose the locker room.
So can I just say what I think we're all kind of thinking? I don't know this is a want-to problem. I think this is a, hey, you don't have a top 6 forward that you need right now. You're missing it. And you've seen Buchnevich take a step back. And right now you look at the bottom 6 and it's like you don't have a third-line center. We thought it was a second-line center. You don't have a third-line center right now. Matthew Joseph today is back into that spot as the third-line center for them. Sonny was skating with the extras. Well, you don't have one. Like, if Matthew Joseph is your answer to that, and you know, Alex, I like Matthew Joseph, but he ain't the answer as a third-line center on a contending team. So they don't have anybody to play there. They tried Zach Bolduc on that top line. Honestly, I thought it worked, but they went away from it again today. They've got neighbors back with Thomas and Booch. I think what is plaguing the Blues right now is that they're a 500 roster and they're playing like a 500 team. And we all came into the season saying that. We all thought, looking at the roster, we're like, if we're being honest about it, can they compete for a wild card spot? They probably could if a lot of things kind of go their way. And the Western Conference isn't as good as a lot of people are projecting it to be. Well, they are that roster today. The Western Conference, specifically the Calgary Flames, have pulled away a bit from the Blues. And this team's just not ready for that yet. They want it to be. They so desperately want it to be. And they've made additions to try to make it prepared for that. And Cam Fowler, I think, was a good in-season addition. I think hiring Jim Montgomery was a smart thing for them to do. My fear is they are trying to microwave what is really a, full bake. They got to put this bad boy in the oven, and it's going to take a couple hours before it's ready to go.
And that never works when you put it in the microwave over the oven.
And instead, they're Betty Crocker in it. They're putting it into the microwave, and they're saying, yeah, this will taste every bit as good as if we let it bake the way that it's supposed to. And I don't think it's ready yet.
So here's my only pushback with that. I think they have 4 guys that are top 6 forwards. Agreed. And, of course, you're looking for more.
But if you're a contending team, you have 6.
And I didn't expect them to be a contending team. I expected them to be a team that could be in the playoffs. How many top 6 forwards does the Calgary Flames have?
I don't watch them night to night, so it's difficult for me to say.
Well, I'll read the names.
If you just want me to be honest.
I'll read the names to you. Jonathan Huberdeau, top 6, yes or no?
Yeah.
Nazem Kadri, top 6.
Yeah. I hate that.
Jakob Pelletier.
Sure.
Listen, man, you ain't going to get an argument from me.
But the fact that you don't know who he is?
But if I was a Calgary Flames fan, like, would I know who a lot of the Blues guys are?
Sure. Blake Coleman.
Middle 6.
I think that's a Brandon Saad. Sure. Mikael Backlund. I think that's honestly a Braden Shen.
Coleman's been much better than Brandon Saad this year.
But in his career, I think that's exactly what he is. Sure. Matt Coronado, kind of like a Zach Bolduc. What I'm trying to get at is, if you don't have the top 6 talent like a lot of the contending teams have, you do need to have a team mentality. And I think what the problem right now is, and where the frustration comes from, is the top 4 of the top 6 forwards that you have, and I can't make an argument for a Holloway or a Kyrou because they've been pretty consistent for the last 15. We're talking about Thomas and Buchnevich right now. When those are the guys that aren't invested from start to finish, and I'm not saying that the effort's not there, because it is, it's just the same type of player on a nightly basis. The frustrating part is, you come into a game, you never know what team's going to show up. Whereas Calgary, like, even if you don't have 4 top 6 forwards, or if you only got 3, you know what they're going to do every single night, and it's why they're staying competitive. And that is what's dipped from this Blues team.
Yeah. And
I'm going to say one more thing that's going to make people mad.
Oh, boy.
They're getting better goaltending.
You're not wrong.
I mean, that's the biggest difference between those two teams, is one team has a starting goalie that's got a .916 save percentage and the other team doesn't.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And what sucks about that is, at least over these last 4 or 5 games, they've gotten fine goaltending. The offense has disappeared, and they're not putting the same level of interest in the offensive zone that they were when the goaltending was giving up 5 or 6 goals.
They've also just been snake bit a little bit. Like over the weekend, they had a few shots that hit the post. There's nothing you can do there. You got I think some of this is they dug themselves into such a big hole that it's so unbelievably difficult to be able to dig yourself out of it. And they were too far down, man. They were too far down, and now they had an opportunity, and they expended so much energy to try to get themselves out of the hole that it's like the Cardinals from last year. It's really a rerun of the Cardinals season. Man, it's too much too quickly, and trying to get yourself back into it is unbelievably difficult. That's where I think this Blues team is right now. And I was hopeful. I thought maybe they could do it, because they were so much fun to watch there for that stretch of time. And those 2 wins against Calgary, I was like, all right, you did it. That can't be the end. You've got to keep going, guys. You got to get like 6 of the next 7, something like that. And now we're into a stretch of games where you got Vancouver, Colorado, Utah, Edmonton, and Florida. And it feels like it could get worse before it gets better. And if it does, well, now you find yourself basically at the trade deadline. And you've made the decision for Doug Armstrong, but it ain't the decision that any of us wanted it to be.
Yeah, in 5 points, really 9 points, if you take those 2 games in hand. By the time this stretch ends, where you're going into the Four Nations tournament, I think the assumption is already made by the front office, and there's no changing it. The real question is going to be, what can you do with your roster? Because I don't think there's a whole lot of assets that you can move.
I think you probably stand pat.
Probably, but then I think that lies more of an issue for Doug Armstrong this offseason, because there's a revolving problem that has been there for 3 years, to where the same question is brought up. Why isn't the team ready to go from the start?
Yeah, and then it becomes a question of, can Dvorsky help that? Can Snuggerud help that? And if not,
and honestly, that's why you bring Jim Montgomery in, because Jim Montgomery's here. Jim Montgomery looks at his roster and says, this is what is not working.
Coming up next, we're going to get into questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, we'll get to those coming up here on BK and Ferrario.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care, who have been making people comfortable since 1926. I talk so highly of them because I've been using them since 2016. My dad has been using them since I can't even remember when, since he's owned a home. And that's what Classic Air Care is all about. You get a part of a great company that's taking care of your HVAC system, and you keep it a part of your family long term. Why? Because if you got incredible technicians, so knowledgeable when they come out to fix whatever problems that you have it resolved resolved for you, but the incredible customer service. And you can check out the over 3,000 reviews up on Google+. Got a 4.8 rating talking about the great customer service. I speak so highly about the maintenance agreement. It's a program that I'm a part of with Classic Air Care, where twice a year they come out, spring, fall, check the unit, clean it, fine-tune it, make sure it's good to go. But when issues arise, because of course they come up with something like the HVAC system, then they're out there. You get priority because you're a part of the maintenance agreement. So give them a call today or schedule online. Just do me a favor. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you and be a part of the family that is Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN, 314-399-9646. That's the Air Comfort Service text line to get your questions in from the 636. Alex, if the Blues fall further out of the playoffs, does that mean it's even more likely that we see Dvorsky up earlier this season?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Snuggerud's not coming until the last game of the season. So, I mean, you get one game from Jimmy Snuggerud, and that'll be it. And I don't think there's any question that he's going to sign once his season's over. It's just you have to wait until the Frozen Four is done. Dvorsky, I think, post-trade deadline, if they can move bodies out, I think you see him. Look at what they did last year, and I think that's what Doug referenced. Like last year when they fell out of it, what did they start doing? They started calling up a lot of the guys from the minor leagues to give them looks. You got to see a lot more of Tyler Tucker. You got to see a couple. Leo Loof, I think, played one game. Like, you got to see a lot of guys.
Got a run.
Zach Dean got a run. They brought up Hugh McGing for a couple of games. You'll see.
I liked McGing.
You'll see. Did you? You liked him, huh?
I thought he was fine as a fourth-line player.
He's a feisty little 5'10" dude.
I like my little guys. I like him and
T-Bone.
Walker.
T-Bone.
Yeah, and me. Don't
You'll see
Size is
Dvorsky.
nothing but a number, Alex.
That's what I've been told. I think you'll see Dvorsky.
goodness.
I think you'll see Kaskamaki, who they're really high on. Zach Dean just returned to action yesterday from an injury, so you'll probably see him at some point. And then you'll get another look at Matt Kessel and probably a couple of the other younger defensemen. They will go youth movement. Not youth movement, like fully youth movement, but they will bring younger guys up to get them a taste of the NHL post-trade deadline if they're out of it.
Youth movement in the bottom six, I think, is what you can potentially expect.
With
And
Dvorsky with a shot at the middle six to see what he looks like.
I think that's probably right, and I think we'll see him probably sooner rather than later because of this.
And I will say this, too, like, I don't know what's going to happen, and by no means am I advocating for a tank, but I was looking at this the other day because obviously that window that Doug put on them, and he said it was kind of like the LA Kings. It's the one thing that you got that they got that you did not was the top 5 pick. And in that one year that the LA Kings were really bad, I think it was the final year in that 3-year window, they drafted Quentin Byfield second overall, and then they never drafted top 15 again.
All right, from the 573, guys, are the Missouri Tigers for real, or are they just getting lucky right now?
Better
this
than
team's
Illinois.
legit good. Legitimately good. They now have wins this year against Kansas, Florida, and Ole Miss. All 3 of those teams are in the top 20 in KenPom. Those are big-time victories, guys. They've got a tough one next weekend against Mississippi State. That one's on the road. That is going to be an incredibly difficult game to win. But the benefit of what they've done thus far is they've given themselves a margin for error. They've got to go like 5-6 the rest of the way in conference play to feel pretty good about their chances of getting into the NCAA tournament, and I'd be pretty surprised if that's what they ended up with in the rest of the conference slate. So it's deeper than the first team that Dennis Gates had. I think they have more of a like 1-2 punch that you can depend on every single night, regardless of opponent. Offense is more consistent. Defense is probably a little better as well, and they're going back to the same thing that they had in that first year where they're just stealing the ball like crazy. This is a really good team. I think it's the best team that Missouri has had since, like, the second Frank Haith team.
Oh, yeah.
That's the best team in more than a decade at Mizzou. So, yeah, I think this is legitimately a good team. They're not on Illinois' level necessarily.
Better.
They might be like a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament, and you should expect them to win a round in the tournament.
Yeah. Be careful what you say when you kind of compare them to old teams because, I tweeted out Illinois. I was so riding high, and I was like, man, this is probably the best team Illinois has had since that team that got to the championship and lost to, I think it was North Carolina, if I remember correctly. Since then, they've lost 3 of 5. So, careful.
So you're the new BKO.
Yeah, it might have been me.
Looked good the other day, though. Over the weekend.
I think it took them a game to figure it out without Isevich, who's out. But they'll be fine. They'll be fine. They'll be better than Mizzou.
You sound like you're trying to convince yourself.
I am.
Mizzou's really good. They're a really good basketball team this year. And Illinois is a really good basketball team as well. They had a weird rough spot, but guess what? They're in a really difficult conference, and they had one bad game, basically. They had a bad game against USC, and then they went up against 2 really good opponents.
Yeah. Maryland just beat the crap
that was the
out
story.
of them.
You know what good teams do against good opponents?
Occasionally they win.
No,
Michigan
not occasionally.
State on
They
the
win.
road, they lost by 2.
I'm sorry, Mizzou beat
I gave
Kansas.
T-Bone some crap for it, but they beat Kansas at
They've
home.
got 2 games in the top, I think it's top 15, where they've lost by 2. Michigan State and then at number 1, Tennessee. They lost by, I think it was either 2 or 4, but they were in that game the entire time.
One of those was on the road.
Yeah.
It's a tough conference. I mean, Big Ten and SEC, whether it's football or basketball, it's going to be tough, man. Trying to rack up the wins in those 2 conferences, respectively, is not going to be an easy thing to be able to do. All right, he's T-Bone. That's Alex. I'm BK. Coming up next, we got to get back to the NFL because the Bills are eventually going to break through.
Blues will too.
Right? Like, that's going to happen? I think there are some that are waning some confidence in that. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. All right, with Alex and T-Bone on BK, so the Bills are eventually going to break through, right? Donnie certainly hopes so. And Alex, I actually do believe it. I do think they will eventually break through. As I've continued to watch Josh Allen and the way that his career has progressed, man, that guy has been able to avoid the turnover-worthy plays, barring the first drive. Yesterday, the first drive was wonky. But generally speaking, it's the thing that he's eliminated most from his earlier portion of his career. This guy was a wild Bronco early on, man. He was just doing everything. Like, he had that game against the Texans. I'll never forget it because I had bet on the Bills in the game. And he literally tossed the ball away. Like, he tossed the game away by just, like, throwing it to the Texans like a game of hot potato. And he's not doing that stupid stuff anymore in the playoffs. And what you get instead is just an under-control version of one of the greatest athletes that I've ever seen to play the position. And I don't say that, like, understating it. The guy is like Cam Newton, but with a rifle of an arm and more accurate than Cam Newton ever was. And he's just terrifying to go up against. That throw that he made yesterday to Matt Collins.
Oh, it was probably the most impressive throw that I have seen from Josh Allen in the last few years.
That was unbelievable. Given
bullet.
the situation that he's in, given the defender that's there, and Trent McDuffie had great coverage. There's nothing more that you can do on that play. It was just Josh Allen beating the opponent with a perfect throw, and there's no defense for a perfect throw. So I truly do believe the Bills will eventually break through. But Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter yesterday said something that I think was interesting, Alex, because there's been a lot of comparison to Mahomes and Jordan and all that stuff. Van Pelt brought up a different comparison across sports one. Here's what he had to say about the Bills and the possibility of them not breaking through.
This Bills team feels a bit like somebody on the PGA Tour in his prime in the early 2000s. There was that Tiger Woods guy you had to deal with. Kansas City has Patrick Mahomes and a whole lot more to go with him, and the Bills fall short again. And you tell yourself that you're going to break through, but that likely means you're eventually going to have to beat this Chiefs team and that guy. And the harsh possibility, I'm not going to say reality because it hadn't proved itself yet, but the possibility is something that Buffalo has already lived. Maybe you just never do.
Alex, how do you feel today? Because I think there are people that are on either side. There are some people that watched that game last night and said, hey, if not for the refs, the Chiefs would have already lost yesterday. And Josh is going to get his because eventually those calls will go their way. And there are other people on the other side that say, I'm not sure that it's going to happen, man. Already 4 times. Nobody's ever had this before, specifically, where they are a quarterback and they go up against another quarterback on the opposite side with the same team 4 different times and lose all 4. Nobody's ever done that until Josh Allen against the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. And it's just not going to happen, and eventually it's going to get into their own heads. Where do you fall on this, Alex?
I think it's going to happen at some point. I don't know when and I don't know how, but I do think it's going to happen. The one thing about the Buffalo Bills is it's not like all their players are old and you've only got a couple more years. Like Josh Allen's 29 years old. He's the same age as Patrick Mahomes. They've got a fairly young roster. It's going to come down to circumstances for it to happen. Like, I think Buffalo's going to have to find a way to play Kansas City on their home field. I think playing in Kansas City is always detrimental for Buffalo. I see a roster and I say, as long as you've got Josh Allen, you'll get there. But it's kind of a 50-50 like toss-up, you'll get there. I believe it'll happen. Boy, I think it's like an injury has to take place or something odd has to happen to Kansas City to be even more vulnerable than what they are now. Because at full strength, Kansas City, I'm not sure Buffalo. Like, yes, they could go out there and add another weapon. Who? Like, they had Stephon Diggs, who was one of the best wide receivers in the game, and they weren't able to get it done. Now, this is a different version of Josh Allen, but then you've got the cap space conversation you have to talk about. Do they have the finances and funds available to go out there and bring in another star player? So I'm skeptical, but history tells us that at some point Josh Allen can bust through and beat Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I think he'll be able to do it at some point. And the reason I say that is because I think this is one of the worst teams he's had when he's gone up against Mahomes. And that's not trying to take too much away from that Bills team because they were really good. I think they had probably the better roster than the Kansas City Chiefs. But remember, they're in their kind of reset year where they're resetting the books. They're only going to get better from here. And that's why I look at them and I go, I think at some point when you do have a more complete roster, more star-laden roster, as we kind of talked about on Friday, I think that's when they will break through because you're right. Allen has cut away the mistakes that he made early on in his career. He's taking better care of the football now. Early on that first drive yesterday, threw the ball in a little bit of risky spots. but we saw the throw to Mac Hollins. He can make those kind of plays, which are necessary in playoff runs, but he's also taking care of the football. And I think when he gets a better surrounding cast around him, I think that's when he'll be able to break through.
I'm in total agreement with that. I also think that he's just good enough, man. This is a guy that's eventually going to get there. And I do think it potentially is in their heads at this point where they are waiting for kind of like the Tiger analogy, right? Tiger would just wait for somebody else to screw up.
Yeah.
And if Tiger was up there on the leaderboard and it's a Sunday, you're going to mess up and he's going to be able to take advantage and pull away.
Tiger had ice in his veins the final day of the tournaments because he knew somebody was going to choke.
And that's what the Chiefs do. The Chiefs wait for your mistake and then they pounce on it. And for the Bills last night, whether you think it was the ref's fault, you think it was their fault, whoever, like forget the blame game right now. The Chiefs had an opportunity to step on the throat of the Bills, and they did. Now, I thought they should have done it even more so. They ended up having to settle for a field goal, and the Bills got another opportunity to be able to get back with it. But that fourth down stop, refs gifting it to them, or if you think it was truly a fourth down stop, that's the kind of thing that the Chiefs do. They get that opportunity, and they go take advantage. Meanwhile, the Bills had an opportunity. After that stop, they had an opportunity, and they couldn't take advantage. The Chiefs had the exact right play call defensively at the exact right time, and Josh Allen was under unbelievable duress. He made an incredible play to even give Dalton Kincaid a chance on that play. It just didn't quite fall for him. So I think eventually those will go in the Bills' direction. I do think that's going to happen sometime down the road. But man, 4 times in a row, 4 times. You beat him in the regular season every time, and you lose in the playoffs every time. That is a pattern that is going to be extremely difficult for them to be able to reverse.
Someone on the text line asked a really good question. Who breaks through first, Lamar or Josh?
Josh.
We're all in agreement, right?
I don't even think it's close.
Yep. Because until Lamar stops making the mistakes that Josh Allen stopped making 2 years ago, Lamar doesn't have a shot to break through.
And I don't... It's not a shot at Lamar. I guess it is.
Just, come on, lean into it.
Lamar's not where Josh is in the development process. And I don't know if he's ever going to get there, honestly. Like, I think it might just be a blind spot in his game. The sacks that Lamar Jackson takes, I think we talk way too little about sacks. Way too little for quarterbacks. Because it's a quarterback stat, man. You could put 2 different quarterbacks between the exact same behind the exact same offensive line, and one of them's going to take 1 or 2 sacks a game, the other's going to take 5 or 6. And it's because of the way that they hold on to the ball, and some of that is a gift. Lamar can make such unbelievable plays out of structure. But when he's doing that, it takes a lot of time, and it's really hard to hold up on your protection when he's going through those. And it leads to holding calls, and it leads to sacks. And those sacks are drive killers, dude. And he had one at 2nd and goal inside of the 5-yard line that took him out of the opportunity to be able to run it on 3rd and 4th down potentially. That was one. And then last year against the Chiefs, he took a sack that was totally detrimental to his team. They were in field goal range, and the sack took him out of field goal range, and they had to punt it back to Kansas City. Those are the kinds of plays that do not get discussed enough, and it is a huge problem inside of his game, and Josh is the opposite. That dude never takes sacks. Even yesterday, he had one play. I can't remember specifically when this took place, but he had a defensive lineman all over him. Spun out of it and found a way to get rid of the football, and instead of taking like a 7-yard loss, it is just being a no gain.
Well, and how about the fumble that he had? He fumbled it and then picked it up himself and was like, cool, nothing happened.
It's like Ben Roethlisberger mixed with Cam Newton, and then you throw in, like, I don't know, Russell Wilson as a thrower of the football. It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane, the type of package that he has. All right, I do want to get to one other thing. Because Bill Simmons, I think, is one of the best analysts out there. He's an insane person, but he's great. And yesterday, he opened up his podcast. I listened to it after the games last night because I was curious, because he can be a bit, at times, of a curmudgeon. And what I mean by that is this guy was a Patriots fan. Grew up in Boston. He's the Boston sports guy, right? So there are times where he sees what the Chiefs are doing, and he's like, man, they're coming for my throne. I'm a Patriots fan. They're coming for my team. I was curious what he had to say yesterday, coming off of that Chiefs win. And I honestly thought he broke it down incredibly well. And I have the same thoughts on this. I think we're all on the same page. I would guess a decent portion of our audience totally disagrees with this. But I want to play and get your reaction on the other side, Alex.
I really like true greatness. I really appreciate this Chiefs team. Every once in a while in sports, you have this measuring stick, not just for the sport, but for all the sports, right? Like, I hated the Yankees in the late 80s, late 90s. I hated that team. But I respected the out of them. When Arizona beat them in 2001, it was like, this is momentous. The Pats were able to get that in the mid-2010s. And Philly beat them with Foles and Peterson. It was like, this feels momentous. You need teams every once in a while that are truly great, and then you see how everyone measures up. And they did it again. I don't know when this stops.
What I love about what he said there is that they're the measuring stick team now. If you get into a game like yesterday, everybody's rooting against the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. Everybody. Unless you're a Chiefs fan, you were a Bills fan yesterday. That's huge. You need that. And I think there are times where, like, the NBA right now is this. Who's the measuring stick team in the NBA right now? Who is it?
There's not one.
I guess would you say Boston because it just won? Yeah.
But they don't have a top 5 player in the league. So it's hard to be that team when there is nobody that is going to be thought of as among the all-time greats. The Warriors were this. You felt it. When you saw them go to the NBA Finals and it was them versus LeBron, you knew this is a moment. Mm-hmm. The Patriots, anytime they got to the Super Bowl, you knew this is an opportunity for somebody to go out there and, like, dethrone the champs. Or when the Giants played the Patriots and it's the 16-0 Pats versus this, like, underdog story of the Giants, that's what made that so special, right? It's the David versus Goliath thing. That's what the Chiefs have become. The Chiefs are that team that allow you to measure the rest of the league and where you're at. The Bills can now measure where they're at on their life cycle of a franchise because they just saw what they do against the Chiefs. The Ravens didn't get that opportunity this year because they're too far away. The Texans, you know what was a great thing for them this year? To get to that game against the Chiefs and see, oh no, our offensive line rules are wrong. It's not that we don't have the talent, although they don't. It's that our coaching sucks. So what they do, they fired their offensive coordinator, and my guess is they'll let go of their offensive line coach as well. Because they saw, hey, to be the champs, we got to beat that team, and our coaching isn't good enough to get it done right now on the offensive side of the football. That's what having the Chiefs in the league allows you to do. And I would be saying this if it was the Chiefs or what it was with the Patriots. If your team goes up against them, you find out very quickly where you're at.
I forget who had it earlier.
Need that in the league.
I forget who had it earlier this morning, but I heard him say, like, Patrick Mahomes is the Michael Jordan of this era. And he said, you know why? It's because every time he goes up against elite talent, he doesn't make him look as elite for how good Patrick Mahomes is. And I mean, to your point about Lamar Jackson, like, go back a couple of years ago, he had his shot, and it was a 1-touchdown score that you lost 17-10. If you go back in the 3 games that Josh Allen has played against the Chiefs, they've been a 3-point loss or less. Like, they keep it competitive. And that game, as much as we don't want to see the Chiefs win, that game solidified Buffalo as the second best team in the AFC because they do it.
You know what else I go back to, speaking of previous iterations of this? The Joe Burrow win. You know what put Joe Burrow truly on the map?
Yep.
It was that game.
Eliminated the Chiefs.
It was cold-blooded. It was a killer. That dude put himself on the map because he's been good since then, but he's had some injuries, and the team hasn't been very good. They haven't been back to the playoffs in that type of way. Like, the Bengals really haven't been the team that we all expected them to be since that Super Bowl appearance.
Yeah, but look at what we were saying this year. If they get in, it's like, oh, they could hurt the Chiefs.
And it's because of one game. It's because of one game and what they were able to do. They made the Chiefs bleed their own blood, and the only other dude that's been able to do that in the postseason, literally the only other guy, is Tom Brady. Tom Brady did it twice. Joe Burrow did it once. Nobody else has done it. Those are the only 3 losses that Patrick Mahomes has in his entire NFL playoff career. He's been in the league since 2018. He's lost 3 times, and it's to those 2 guys. That's what this team allows you to do. You can find out exactly where you're at, and you can become a superstar, a megastar, and you increase where you're at in terms of, like, the rankings exponentially based on what you do against this team. That's what's at stake next week or 2 weeks from now for Jalen Hurts. We talked about him earlier today. Nobody views him as an elite quarterback. You know what potentially gets us to talk about Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni a little different? If they beat that team in the Super Bowl, it's going to change the way we view them. I can promise you that. Or Saquon Barkley might be the thing. Or it's like, that dude was not just great. That dude's going to go down as one of the best running backs in the history of the NFL. This is his Terrell Davis run. Like, that is what is at stake potentially in the Super Bowl. So, I totally agree with Bill Simmons. I think it was a really great point. All right, coming up in 15 minutes.
Man, this really has just become a Chiefs are great podcast.
And I don't mean for that to be the case, but hey, man, when you've got this information in front of you, we've literally never seen this before.
T-Bone, I want to hate them,
hard to ignore it.
But I actually hate the Philadelphia Eagles more.
What?
I know.
We'll talk about that a little bit coming up in 15 minutes. In or out coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, let's start out with this. In or out? The Missouri Tigers and Illinois Fighting Illini will both play on in the Sweet 16. They will both make it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. In or out?
I'm out. I don't think Mizzou gets there. I think they win a round, but I don't know if you win two. I like Mizzou, though. It's going to come down to their ability to shoot from the arc and stay consistent with it. That's how they get there.
Yeah, I'm going to say in. I think Illinois is, for me, they need to be Elite Eight or bust at minimum.
Yep.
For Mizzou, I think playing in the SEC helps you out by the time you get to the tournament. We just mentioned this off air. 10 SEC teams are in the top 25 right now, which is insane. And Mizzou's playing through this gauntlet in the SEC, which will help them, I think, for the tournament. And to me, they don't have a major flaw that really worries me. Like their defense, when they had that team with Kobe Brown that lost to, was it Princeton? Is that who they lost to?
Game.
I remember thinking about that team, like, okay, this team's good, but I don't know if they can come up with critical stops when they need them, and that's exactly what happened in that Princeton game. So I'll say in, though, on this.
I think I'm in as well. It really scares me a lot that I'm saying that I'm in on it, but I am. And it's their shooting that gives me this optimism. That team that you just referenced, T-Bone, they had a shooter. Demoy Hodge was amazing, but overall, their shooting was, and I guess Kobe Brown as well to a degree. But overall, they didn't have shooting and they didn't have rebounding. And when you're missing both of those opportunities, it's not great. This year's team, whoo boy, they can shoot it, man. I have had so much fun watching what Caleb Grill has become. 49% from three-point range on the season.
Dude,
49%.
Awesome.
And there are nights where he just cannot miss. He starts like 4 for 4, and you're like, okay, just keep shooting. Half-court line, go ahead.
Get him the ball.
Get it, King.
So I'll say I'm in. I think they both end up making a run to the Sweet 16. Mizzou's going to have to get up there, though. Like, if they could find a way to maybe get to that 5 line, it's going to be really tough to get there. But if they could get to the 5 seed, that'd probably be where you want to go, because beating that 3 seed in the second round would be tough.
Guys, in or out? If the Blues miss the playoffs, at least one player with 3 or more years left on his contract is traded.
In
So
the
that
offseason?
would in the offseason. So that would qualify as Kyrou, Thomas, Shen, Buchnevich, Falk, Parayko. If you want to put Torrey Krug in there, Jordan Bennington. One of those players gets traded.
I'm out. I do not think they will trade one of those guys. I think their pivot will be like Brandon Saad gets moved, and they probably retain half of the salary, because at that point it's a 1-year deal, $2.5 million. That's a really nice contract, honestly, for another team. Put him on the third line, get 15 goals out of him. He has the experience. Like, whatever, cool. At that point, he's cheaper than like Matthew Joseph on the Blues. Even if he's the 13th forward on a good team, that's worthwhile for you. So I think that's probably the pivot for them. I do not think they're going to end up going out there and trading one of their key core players. If they were going to do that, though, I think the guy they would look to move is probably Booch. I don't know how you can move that, especially since he's got a no trade.
Before you answer, T-Bone, here's the reason why I brought this up. You go back to when they traded TJ Oshie. He had 3 years left on his contract before, or with that offseason that they traded him.
This offseason?
Kyrou, probably.
Kyrou's more accomplished, though, than Oshie was. Oshie was, what, a 25-goal scorer at that point, not a 35?
And Oshie really got his name by the Olympics, not by
Oshie was a good player. I'm not taking that away from him.
Oshie had 3 seasons of 50-plus points before he was traded.
Yeah, and Kyrou's like 70-plus.
Well,
So,
inflation,
but at the
they
time,
didn't score back then.
Yeah, the points weren't as high back then.
No
but
doubt.
Age, type of player, kind of around that. Only reason I brought that up is because that was a ripple effect that the Blues said, like, hey, they were in the playoffs too. They couldn't get over the hump in the playoffs. And they said, hey, we got to make some type of move. And they traded for a guy who was more established, more of a veteran presence like Troy Brouwer.
And Oshie was 28 at the time that they traded him. So that is kind of in that range. How old is Booch now? 29?
29. He'll be 30, I think,
don't know if you know
this
the
year.
answer to this. I apologize if I'm putting you in a bad spot. When does his no trade officially kick in?
It's in the offseason.
I know,
So
but
before July
do you know-
1st. Just like Jordan Kyrou's no trade.
The reason I
kicks in.
ask is because, like, if post Stanley Cup, pre July 1, could they make that move without asking him?
So he's got a modified no trade now, though. So he's got a 12-team no trade list.
That's all right. I got 20 teams to work with, baby.
Yeah. So they can,
I like the way you think.
I'm just curious because this is the kind of thing that Doug Armstrong would absolutely try to exploit.
Yeah, so basically, before July 1st, Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas have no trade protection. Next season, Booch does become a full no trade. Right. It's a modified beforehand. And then Braden Shen, Justin Falk, and Torrey Krug's trade protection becomes a modified no trade after this season, so after July 1st. And Pareko's still got no trade protection.
The reason I ask is because I think he's the guy. If you're looking to make a move, he's probably the one that you'd move. And I think it's actually market value. $8 million is a lot. Maybe you'd have to retain some salary on that, and that sucks because it's 6 years of it.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
if you retain like $2 million a year, it's really not that bad.
I'm in on this. I think if they miss the playoffs again, there's going to have to be a ripple effect type move. I don't know who, and I don't know what they get in return, but you got the coach, you got the young players, you missed the playoffs this year where they believed and they expected to be a playoff team. I think there's a ripple effect move that takes place this offseason.
Yeah, I'm out just because I don't think they'll do it. I think they should. I think we're seeing this core can't get the job done. And that's, like, I, to an extent, agree with what BK said earlier. Well, hey, they're missing some of these pieces. That's why some of these nights they're not coming out and they're not playing good. I agree with that to an extent, but showing up is a core thing. Showing up is being ready to play a hockey game. There's teams that are worse than the Blues that show up and play on nights.
Calgary.
Yeah. So I would say out. I don't think they will do it, but I do think they should consider it.
T-Bone, what do you got?
Guys, in or out? We will see Nolan Arenado get traded to the Boston Red Sox by the time in 2 weeks, I'll say, before training camp, spring training.
I'll say I'm in on this. I think that he's going to end up getting dealt. And the reason why is because for those that didn't see it yesterday, Ryan Presley officially waived his no-trade clause to go to the Chicago Cubs. Now, there was a little bit of salary retention there from what I understand for the Houston Astros, but it opens up the flexibility for them, money-wise, to financially be able to go pay Alex Bregman what it appears he's asking for. And if the Astros bring back Bregman, that takes Boston out of those sweepstakes. And it sounds like it's a house divided if they even want Alex Bregman. The manager wants him. The front office is wishy-washy on it. So I think they are kind of hoping secretly that this takes place. And then I think Nolan Arenado ends up becoming a Boston Red Sox.
I'm gonna stay out on this one still. I don't think it gets done. I think Nolan Arenado will be a Cardinal this year, and then next year they'll reconvene.
I'm in. I think it's going to happen. Seeing the Astros move some money, look like they're going to go get Bregman. And there was a report out there the other day, I can't remember who it was that had it, but somebody said the Red Sox have interest in Bregman on a short-term deal. Now, if you don't get Bregman, let me introduce you to this short-term deal, which is Arenado, 3 years, like $60 million. So I'm in. I think they do it.
All right, let's get to these from the text lines from the 636. In or out, the Bills should move on from McDermott and buy out Belichick from his UNC deal and make him the next head coach of the Buffalo Bills.
Out. Can we stop with this nonsense? This is what you have to do when a team can't get over a hump. Well, you got to fire somebody. No, stick with the coach that's gotten you to the playoffs for 7 straight seasons. You don't know what you got till it's gone, T-Bone.
Amen.
Just like I used to say to myself in the mirror when the high school girls would leave me when I was 17 years old.
I'm out on this. I don't think you need to get rid of McDermott. I think he's one of the top 5, top 7-ish head coach in the NFL. I mean, Alex just mentioned him getting the team to the playoffs. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. We've seen this multiple times where they go, the coaches are a problem. This coach will get us over the top. And then you look at that coach and go, wait, we didn't even make it to the playoffs.
Finish your answer, and then I got a little bit of news for you.
Sure. 2019 to 2024 Bills have 78 wins. That's a 6-year span, and it's the most of any team in NFL history without making it to a Super Bowl in a 6-year stretch. Second on that list, by the way, 2019 to 2024 Ravens with 71. So the past 6 years Bills and the past 6 years Ravens have both been stopped from getting to a Super Bowl, mostly by the Chiefs. And that's not on McDermott, and that is not on John Harbaugh. Those guys are great head coaches. They're just going up against something that is inevitable right now. So, no, I'm out on this. McDermott's a really good head coach. What do you got?
Blues have officially traded Scott Perunovich to the New York Islanders for a conditional 5th-round draft pick. In the 2026 draft. So not this year's draft, next year's draft.
We can do this real quick because we don't have to spend a lot of time on it.
Whoa.
You don't need Scott Perunovich goes on to become a top 4 defenseman with the Islanders.
Out. I don't think he can be a top 4 defenseman until his willingness to shoot the puck more. And the one thing, because I know a lot of people are probably texting in saying, Vince Dunn, Jake Wallman, watch him go off.
Oh, no.
Those two guys were never afraid to shoot the puck. And I'm not saying Scott Perunovich was afraid to shoot, but he was unwilling to shoot. And when you got power play time, you cannot look at this and say Scott Perunovich didn't get the opportunity, because Scott Perunovich last year was consistently in the lineup. This year, Scott Perunovich got power play chances, and the unwillingness to shoot the puck is what put him on the bench. It's what Tyler Tucker has gotten consistent playing time, because every single night he's giving you 2 to 3 shots on goal. So this has got to be Doug trying to just find an opportunity for him to play. Islanders got a ton of injuries on defense. But no, I think he could be a decent third pair defenseman or a nice rotation of a defenseman. But until you're willing to shoot, you can't be a top 4.
That's where I'm at as well. I just don't see it. I don't see it with him. To your point on the shooting, Alex, he has 59 career shots on goal in 97 career games. 57 shots, or excuse me, 59 shots in 97 games.
Yeah.
That's not going to do it, man. You've got to be more willing to be able to put shots on net. I think this might be a situation where we end up looking back and he goes to the Islanders and he puts up some points. That might happen here. But don't forget that it's about more than just that. He could go there, put up decent assist numbers, and you'll be wondering, like, why couldn't he have done that here? He probably could have. But he wasn't getting the opportunity for a reason. And now it's 3 different coaches that all came to the same conclusion with Perunovich. Because there was a point in time where I was a Perunovich truther.
Well, and that was Drew Bannister, who had him in the minors and said, like, this is one of the best players I've ever coached in the minors, and he couldn't get there. To put that into context of what BK just referenced, 59 shots, you said, in his career. Tyler Tucker has 17 shots on goal in 16 games this season.
Yeah, he's shooting at least once per game. It's not working here, and I hope it works out for Perunovich.
Yeah.
It's just very clear it was never going to happen here, so I think it's the right move.
He's going to get playing time because the Islanders have like 3 of their top 6 out, so he's going to play every single night. Until you shoot, though, it's just hard to believe.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, are the Commanders going to be this year's version of what we thought of the 2024 Texans, so last year's Texans, where it's like, oh, here they come. Are they going to be able to break through in the way that the Texans didn't, or was this is just the start of something special? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendricks, New York Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues will be back in action tonight as they host the Vancouver Canucks. Well, pregame coverage starting at 5:30 with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Carver for puck drop at 6:30. And if you just missed the news, St. Louis Blues have made a trade as they trade defenseman Scott Perunovich to the New York Islanders in exchange for a conditional 5th-round pick in the 2026 NHL Draft. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet, Johnny Londoff Autoplex, CLeLondoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, Alex, so the Texans last year, they're coming off of this unbelievable season by C.J. Stroud, and I was like, all right, now's the time to push. And then they went out in the offseason, they signed Danielle Hunter, they end up getting Stephon Diggs via that trade, and he looked around at the roster, and they get Joe Mixon as well. All right, this is a team that not only was able to make a push last year in the playoffs in the first year with C.J. Stroud, maybe they're a potential favorite to come out of the AFC. I know you loved the Texans coming into the season, and you were far from alone in that regard. Yes, they dealt with some injuries this year. That has to be acknowledged. Tank Dell going down with that devastating knee injury was a big problem for them, and Stephon Diggs going down with an injury as well, that was also an issue. But this was not a championship caliber roster. They weren't good enough this year. The coaching wasn't good enough. The team wasn't good enough. And so they ended up basically having the same year this year that they had a year ago. And they didn't necessarily take that big step forward that people were anticipating. So fast forward to where we are today. The Commanders just had this shockingly good season. Jaden Daniels comes in, and much like C.J. Stroud a year ago, looks like a 10-year veteran as opposed to a rookie quarterback, and everything he did in college just translated immediately to the NFL. So this offseason, they're probably going to go out there and make some big-time moves because they've got a quarterback that they know is good on a rookie deal. It's the biggest advantage in all of professional sports. Alex, with the way that we're viewing the Commanders today, do you think next year will be more like what we saw this year from the Texans? Or will they be able to take the step that the Texans were incapable of this year?
I think all of this revolves around their offensive coordinator's decision with Cliff Kingsbury. And I don't know if he's made it announced if he's staying or if he's going, but I know the Texans
He's expected to stay. There's really nowhere else for him to go at this point.
I know the Texans had the same offensive coordinator, but like it dropped significantly so much to where they're like, nope, get the bleep out of here. It got ugly fast. I don't think that happens if Cliff Kingsbury is there. He obviously has the right game plan and scheme that works with Jane Daniels. I don't see the same step back for the Commanders as long as they spend the money smartly. And what I mean by that is like the Texans went out there and loaded up everything on offense. They got 2 playmakers in Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon. They upgraded their defense, but it's like they threw too many solutions to one problem, and then it got like it was like an overload with work on the offensive side to where like it felt like in those first couple of games there were so many options that C.J. Stroud kind of was like, what am I supposed to do here? And some of that's on the offensive coordinator. I mean, I just don't feel that same way with Jaden Daniels. Like under pressure, Jaden Daniels is making simple decisions. And if they go out there and let's hypothetically say they go throw money at T. Higgins and say, we want you on this team, I think that makes this team significantly better because they were working with Terry McLaurin and then
Tommy Brown, Zacchaeus, like the guys that should be 4th or 5th receivers, not number 2 receivers.
Totally, and a couple of them
Zach
had
Ertz, who's 50.
Yeah,
he had a really good game yesterday.
Just put a number.
And Brown, by the way, had 2 fumbles, I think, in that game for the Commanders. So, like, I think if you go out there and you spend money to put a little more talent on the defensive side, go get a weapon for Jaden Daniels, I think because of the offensive coordinator and the quarterback, I think more weapons helps this team rather than what the Texans did.
To me, like I'm with you, they need a weapon. They need to get somebody in there. And I don't think it has to be anybody great. Like Hollywood Brown, I don't know what his plans are, whether he's going to come back to the Chiefs or what the Chiefs' plans are with him. He'd make a lot of sense for them. A 1-year deal where he comes in and, hey, $9-10 million with some incentives makes a lot of sense for the Commanders, and I think he'd be a good fit for them. He also played previously with Cliff Kingsbury, so it's not like he's learning a completely brand new offense. That's the kind of fit that I think would make some sense. I wouldn't go out there though and spend the money on a T. Higgins necessarily. You've got your go-to guy in Terry McLaurin, so I'd spend a little bit, improve your weapons, get a little better there. What I think they need is a meat and potatoes type of an offseason. Keep upgrading along the offensive line. Keep upgrading in your front 7. find a way next year to be able to run the ball a little bit better. Find a way next year to not have Bobby Wagner as your middle linebacker when that dude just can't run. He's a Hall of Fame level player, and he was amazing with the Seattle Seahawks back in the day. And I think he's pretty good for your culture. Like, I think that's Alex, we agree on this. I know T-Bone maybe would push back a little bit, the winning versus the culture versus the winning. Bobby Wagner, I think, helped instill the right culture for that team to be able to get to where they are today. He did his job. And now you got to go out there and get somebody that can actually be an above average middle linebacker for your team. Because I think you saw in this game against the Eagles, we talked earlier today about how the Chiefs are a measuring stick team. So are the Eagles in some regards. If you can't stop that running game, you got to find a way to get better there. And they are not good enough right now at shutting down the run. So this offseason, instead of going out there and like focusing on receivers and running backs and these like skill position type of players that are really exciting, but you got to win in the trenches, man. Look at the teams that are still remaining. The Bills did this. The Chiefs do this. The Eagles do this. Go out there and invest in your offensive and defensive lines and make yourself better there and get a middle linebacker.
And it's fitting you mentioned the offensive line because that's also where the Texans took a step back, right? Yep. I mean, Stroud went from being sacked last year 38 times to 52 times this year. So, like, that's a significant jump up. So it is about establishing, like, running the football in the trenches 100% with you, but it's also making sure you keep Daniels protected as well. So they'll have to do kind of that fine balance. What makes me think this is sustainable is I think there's more ceiling to Daniels' game, right? The element of his legs, being able to run the football a lot better than what C.J. Stroud can do. And I think that's where the difference is. And you like QBR as a statistic, right, BK? So,
and for those that aren't familiar with it, it's ESPN's version of quarterback rating. So it includes sacks. It includes the ability for a quarterback to go like scramble on third down for a first down. That's taken into account here, whereas quarterback rating, it is just the pass attempts that's taken into account. So that's why I prefer it to quarterback rating. QBR is the stat. It's by ESPN.
And the reason I bring this up is the QBR for Jane Daniels this year, 70.5. That's what it was in his rookie year. Do you know what C.J. Stroud's QBR was last year? A season in which he went 9-6, threw for 4,100 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 57.5.
Wow.
It was a lot lower than what Jane Daniels is, which makes me think, okay, we probably should have seen a little bit of that regression that we saw from C.J. Stroud this season coming. Sure. I think you're not going to see that from Jayden Daniels.
All right, last thing that I wanted to get to. T-Bone, we've got this audio from the game between the Eagles and the Commanders where the Eagles were potentially going to be awarded a touchdown. Alex, I legitimately didn't know this rule existed. And as we watched this game, Eagles are at the 1-yard line. The Commanders are doing everything they possibly can to stop the tush push, a play that we saw way too much of yesterday. And they decide, you know what, we're just going to anticipate the snap count. We're going to jump over the offensive line whenever we think they're going to snap the football. They had multiple offsides penalties, and then this happened.
You got a situation here. If these are deliberate, and you heard Sean Hockley say that it could lead to an unsportsmanlike conduct call, it could also lead to awarding a score if it happens multiple times like this. So we'll hear what Sean has to say.
Encroachment, defense number 93. Washington has been advised that at some point the referee can award a score if this type of behavior happens again. For now, it's a replay of second down.
Mike, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, it is to keep this happening. Deliberate acts like that to prevent a score after a warning, even though it's two separate people here, can lead to what is called a palpably unfair act. That's how it's defined in the book. And you can do as a referee whatever you'd actually like to do.
Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah, my mom when I was 8. If you don't shut up back there, we're turning around and going home.
I couldn't believe what I had seen on my television. When he showed up and said, we're gonna award them a touchdown, you stop it.
you stop that nonsense. Stop it.
Can you imagine if instead of this happening in the Eagles game, if the Chiefs had that happen, where the ref came over the intercom and said, if the Bills don't stop this, we will just award the Chiefs a touchdown.
Yeah, God, the conspiracies would be even more out of touch right now than what they are today.
That was amazing. That was my favorite moment of the sports
Do you
weekend.
think when they walked over to Dan Quinn and told him, and he's like, "Ooh, okay, we'll award him a touchdown. We're already down by 14."
I think Dan would. I don't believe you. I don't think you have that power.
Do it again.
Apparently, it's happened before. Like I think in the 50s or something like that.
Oh, back when football was football.
Yeah.
Back when it was real.
Back when men were men.
Yeah. Triple option.
I've never heard of that before. I did not know. Genuinely had no idea that was a rule that was in the rule book. That was amazing.
Back when there wasn't roughing the passer. It was just tackles on tackles.
It was
Good
amazing.
hit back then.
And you just go afterwards and drink a beer.
Serious question. Do you guys think they should eliminate the tush push?
No, nobody else does it. Well, look at Buffalo. Did you see them fail on fourth down?
Why are we eliminating stuff because other teams can't figure it out?
I'm with you.
Basically, what's happening is the offensive line is stronger than your defensive line. So get stronger. I mean, like, I wouldn't eliminate a play that works.
I do think somebody's eventually going to get seriously hurt with this, but like, football's tough. Whatever.
Well, then if
aesthetically, like, I don't have as big of an issue with this as a lot of people do, but the play by Josh Allen, that is potentially one of the consequences of running this kind of a play is you have so many bodies in such tight quarters. There's just no way to see for sure. Like, if it ends up being very close, and whatever you think of the call on the field with Josh Allen, it was close one way or the other. That is something you open yourself up to by running this kind of a play in those short yardage situations. It does become you're at the mercy of what the refs see in that spot.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're worried about the injuries or anything that comes into it, like other teams have to take that chance, and that's why it's a fun play to use in a crucial situation. Do I think Philadelphia used it way too much yesterday? Yeah, but guess what? Washington wasn't stopping it, so why would I
the
stop?
Bills used it too much yesterday. They ended up.
And they're not good at it.
5 different times.
Yeah, they're not good at it. So that just goes to show you.
Hit the weight room, Josh. Man, you got to do more
Hit the
squats
weight room
like Hurts.
offensive line.
It does speak to how great the Eagles are at it.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. All right, he's Alex's T-Bone. I'm BK. The Junk Drawer coming up next. T-Bone, excuse me, will explain why he's coughing so much today here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. All right, so yesterday was Champ Bash. Seems like everybody had a good time out there. The Riz show ended up doing their choreographed dance as the punishment. I don't know if that was a punishment for them or for the people that were in attendance.
No,
for
it
their
was
eyes.
gold for us.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was gold for us.
You
I
like
saw.
seeing...
Carey got manhandled by Rafe.
He was grinding all up on him.
Oh, it was just, it wasn't even grinding. He grabbed his head and just shoved it right where anybody's head should not go.
Okay. Well,
it was entertaining for me. Couldn't get a kick line together, the Riz show guys.
That was rough.
That was the opener. I'm like, come on, guys.
Hey, man. Good on them. They went up there and they did what they needed to do. So, Champ Bash is always a good time of the year because we get to see Tanner get absolutely bombed.
Oh, yeah.
He has no ability.
50% of the time, Tanner's getting roasted.
Tanner has no ability to show up to Champ Bash and leave without getting completely inebriated. Mm-hmm. There's no self-control there. He ends up with Ryder and Tommy or boss, and he's like, I got to do it. This is the night where all rules are off. And I had texted you guys earlier in the day and said, hey, guys, got to cancel my cruise. We got some sickness going around in the house, so I'll be back in on Monday. And at that point in time, you knew T-Bone said, game on.
Party time. Yep.
Game on.
He looked at me, in fact, and said, no notes? Oh, yes.
So, T-Bone,
I think we talked about
how you feeling
cruise.
today, buddy? How you feeling?
What cruise?
Yeah, let's talk about the one that got canceled. Not great, as the way I would describe how I'm feeling. Head hurts, got a cough, feel sluggish to say the least.
Knees weak, palms
When
sweaty.
you came in this morning, scale of 1 to 10, how hungover were you?
10.
The first words to us when he walked into our office goes, guys, let's have our pre-show meeting to a whisper.
Yeah. I had my headphones turned down pretty low today.
Turned the lights off.
Yeah. Oh, if we could, that would have been great. Yeah.
We got a text from Mike Ryder at about 9:30 last night, which I guess would have been probably around like third quarter, something like that. Maybe it was a little earlier.
Can I show a picture of T-Bone on our YouTube?
Sure. Yeah. Head over to our YouTube page right now at 101 ESPN STL. YouTube cams, by the way, brought to you by
the Airlines team.
Thanks, buddy. I had to look up real quick.
I got you.
This was the text that Mike Ryder sent of T-Bone, and it said, guys, we might need Bradford tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a little.
Were you
quick nap.
sleeping or did you pass out?
No, I just put my head down.
That is T-Bone. That is at 9:15 last night. T-Bone, what time did you leave the bar?
12:30. I think.
T-Bone, you and I had this talk saying like, hey, we're probably going to duck out at the end of the Eagles game.
Like 5.
And I had to leave a little earlier than that because I had to go home and get the girls before we went to our next destination. And I looked at you and I said, cool, man, like, have fun watching the game
and just
tonight.
to be clear, T-Bone did not drive home, just to make sure that we've got that out there.
Mike Ryder's wife drove him home.
Yeah, thanks.
You're not sick, right?
No.
No, we took care of that last
night. You
night.
seem to be coughing a lot, both on and off of the air.
That we don't need to talk about.
Why is that happening?
What happened?
Nothing happened to lead to a cough. Hell, maybe I am getting a little sick. Nothing happened. Nothing happened.
All right,
man.
I just a little tickle in my throat.
I left, T-Bone. I left. And you said, I'll be right behind you.
I know.
And then we got that picture, and you weren't right behind me.
I still was behind.
No, you weren't. No, you were not,
Yeah, about 6 hours later, T-Bone was following right behind you.
Yeah, T-Bone, my man.
T-Bone thought that
Got to party hard, man.
Was it? Where'd you guys go? You were at
Hot Shots in Fenton, which awesome put together. Big space for us.
And Alton, bring out the best in Tanner Hendrickson. Are we going to Alton this year? Do we know?
No, we don't know.
After Tanner's experience last night, I don't think T-Bone wants to do
I really
Alton.
hope we are, because I got to get our Airbnb if we're going out there.
After my last time,
I was in
never
fetal
drinking
position.
again.
Alex walked by. He was throwing up.
I pounded 12 Bud Lights in a matter of an hour. I went into God mode, and then I went back into my room, and I'm like, well, this is going to get bad
I'm just drinking
quick.
water from now on.
T-Bone.
Never again.
For those curious why I'm here today, a fair question.
I had that question, too.
Yeah, no, I did, too. So our little guy, Luca, he came down with a sickness, last Thursday, I guess it would have been. Yep. And he got sick overnight, and we were wondering what it was. We didn't know. Could have potentially been like some kind of food poisoning or whatever. We just had no idea. And he very rarely gets sick. So he gets sick overnight, ends up staying that way for the next couple of days. And we had our cruise starting today. We should be on a cruise right now, going down to the Bahamas. But instead, I'm here. So my wife ends up coming down with that on Saturday. And at that point in time, we're 48 hours away from getting on a cruise. And the last thing you want to do is be throwing up as you get onto the cruise, much less from the cruise. So we decided to go ahead and cancel that. I will be out on Wednesday through Friday. We're still going to go on vacation, but we had to delay things a little bit. We will not be going on a cruise, but that is why I'm in today. So.
And that is why T-Bone is in the state that he is in today.
Yeah, thanks, man.
It all ended up working out for us.
I blame him.
T-Bone, we should go drink Tuesday night.
I'm VK. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so,
Never
the
again.
Blues are saying the same things that they've been saying for the last 3 years. So what's the answer this time around? We'll talk about that in about 15 minutes. But next, the Super Bowl matchup is officially set. It is the way too early look ahead. What is your level of intrigue for this matchup? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. All right, Super Bowl matchup is set. It is Chiefs versus Eagles, round 2. The storyline for this one is pretty simple. I mean, the defining storyline that I think people are going to get really annoyed with very quickly, if they're not already, three-peat, baby. Or as Jim Nantz said it yesterday, 7 different ways that you can describe a three-peat. Alex, that's the number one storyline in this game, and there's really no close second. Nobody's ever done this before. And so as much as it is going to get annoying and it's going to be rehashed 1,000 different ways over the next 2 weeks as we begin our Super Bowl coverage, it's true. I mean, Mahomes, Kelsey, Andy, this is a game of all legacy games for them. And it's going to be bashed over your head whether you like it or not. What is your level of intrigue, though, for the specific matchup, Alex? Is it high? Is it low? Where is your excitement level going into this one relative to what it typically is for a Super Bowl?
The excitement level, I'd probably put it at like a 5, 4. But the intrigue level is at about like a 7. And I'll explain. I think the three-peat is so interesting to me because this is not an easy sport to win 3 consecutive championships. Hence, it's never been done before. But like where the Kansas City Chiefs are at, why it's so interesting is because it's not like these guys are 36 years old and this is the last run. I asked you in the office, does Andy Reid retire if they win this one? And you said, nope, not a chance. And like that's fascinating to me because like this would seemingly be like a perfect time to walk into the sunset and say, nope, game over. We just won 3 in a row. My name's in the history books. I'll see you later. And then you start to wonder, okay, well, what's this legacy look like? Because it's just Patrick Mahomes. My guess is Travis Kelce's going to be married to Taylor Swift by the end of this Super Bowl, and they'll ride off into the sunset.
What a couple of years.
There will be an engagement on the field. I'm just planning on it right now.
Didn't happen last year.
But like if Andy Reid is still here, even if Travis Kelce is gone, they still find ways to churn out weapons. You still have Chris Jones. You still have Trent McDuffie. Like, why the intrigue is so high is, man, I don't know if this is going to stop. And I know that's frustrating to a lot of people, but I don't know when you're going to see something like this again. And then on the other side, the intrigue's there because there's a lot of hatred towards Nick Sirianni, and I'd like to see them lose.
T-Bone, what's your level of intrigue in this one? Because I feel like this is the most apathetic I've seen a lot of like neutral observers since that Rams versus Patriots Super Bowl from a few years ago. And that was your squad, so you didn't feel the same apathy. Just like this is my squad, so I don't feel that apathy going into this one, especially with the three-peat on the line. But for neutral fans or for yourself, what is your level of intrigue for this matchup? I
think on like a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably at like a 6, probably. There is I am tired of seeing the Chiefs, but there is the fact, and I think, and this is what makes them kind of frustrating when you watch them in the playoffs, they just kind of play a boring brand of football, you know? And I don't really find it all that fun, but what makes it intriguing is the Eagles for me, you know? What I find fascinating is, are the Eagles going to be able to beat Mahomes and this juggernaut Kansas City Chiefs team by not having great quarterback play? Because they haven't really had it this year. Now, credit to Hurts. I mean, we've mentioned it did play well yesterday, but their MO is we're going to be running the football a lot, right? Barkley's the guy. Barkley's the guy that if you can't stop him, you're not going to stop us. Well, can you do that when you go up against Patrick Mahomes, right? Because typically I look at this and we talk about the games that are close, and you look at it and you go, Josh Allen, amazing yesterday. Oh, Lamar Jackson played a great football game. Oh, Joe Burrow, my gosh, Joe Burrow was awesome. We never go, Joe Mixon ran the hell out of the football. Like typically you need your quarterback to outduel Mahomes to beat him. That's where I'm fascinated because I don't think Hurts can do it. But does that matter when you've got Saquon Barkley playing the way that he is? That's where my intrigue lies in this game. But I would have much rather seen the Bills take on the Eagles or the Commanders get to the Super Bowl to take on the Bills.
The most popular possibility was the Commanders going up against the Bills because it's fresh, it's new. We haven't seen the storylines about both of those teams. Jayden Daniels, this unbelievable rookie that is doing something we've never seen done before by getting his team to the Super Bowl as a rookie quarterback. And then Josh is like, dude, everybody's rooting for Josh Allen at this point. We've all seen him crumble so many times in the postseason, not because he failed, but because he just can't quite get over that mountaintop that is Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So I think everybody that is a neutral observer yesterday, for the most part, was rooting for Josh. They wanted to see him get his, and instead what you're left with is the Chiefs versus the Eagles. So for me, I mean, I'm at like an 8, but that's mostly Chiefs related. This Eagles team, outside of Saquon Barkley, really does very little for me. I'm not super intrigued. I don't love Nick Sirianni. You guys know that. The defense, while interesting, I suppose, it's not as if they have like a bunch of superstars. Maybe Jalen Carter becomes that over the course of his career. Darius Slay is a really good player, but they're not a star-studded unit the way that, say, the 49ers were or the Seahawks have been in the past. So that, hell, even the Rams, who had Aaron Donald on that side of the football, they don't really have that. And so the intrigue for me is mostly it is that three-peat, man. I think that's going to be the biggest storyline. It's like 1, 2, and 3 going into this game. Do you have anything else that intrigues you about this, Alex? Like, what are the other storylines that you find to be interesting?
Probably Saquon, because I don't know what the record is in terms of rushing touchdowns in a single postseason run, but he's at 7 right now, which is
that's amazing.
Really impressive for Saquon. Somebody tweeted out earlier that Saquon's got 7 postseason touchdowns. The Dallas Cowboys had 6 rushing touchdowns all season.
Oh my God.
So it goes to show you how bad of a decision that was from Jerry Jones. Let's go hire Brian Schottenheimer. I think it's watching Saquon Barkley. And then honestly, I think it's somewhat just the play of Jalen Hurts. And it's weird to say because it's another Super Bowl, so it's hard to take anything away. But it's just been such an up and down last couple of years of Jalen Hurts to where he's been silent and you don't know where he's at. And then how does he look in this one? There's some intriguing terms of kind of what Jalen Hurts' career is going to continue to move forward with. Because if this is a Super Bowl win that Saquon dominates, are we still talking about Jalen Hurts the same? I mean, you're at 2 Super Bowls, you win a Super Bowl, you can't take that away from him. But you're talking about a Super Bowl victory that everybody's going to be discussing the running game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. Like, I do think there will be some that will look at that and go, that wasn't Jalen Hurts that won the Super Bowl for the Eagles. That was Saquon Barkley. He would almost need to have the game that he had in the Super Bowl where they lost, because he was great in the game when they played Kansas City. It was the only game he played well 2 years ago in the postseason. I think all the other games he had less than 200 passing yards.
Yeah.
So when you look at him, I think it is going to come down to, okay, does he make the plays, right? Is he going to be the one that makes the plays, or is it going to be the standard, hey, Saquon Barkley's the guy? And I expect the Chiefs to game plan and be able to slow him down. Now, when I say slow down, that means 80 rushing yards and probably 1 or 2 explosive plays. But if you stop him, can Jalen Hurts take his game to another level? And I just don't think he has it in him.
So in this postseason, Saquon Barkley has 5 rushing touchdowns thus far. He had 2 in his first playoff game as well. So he has 7 career playoff touchdowns.
Gotcha.
But he has 5 so far in this postseason. Only one player, for context, Alex, if he were to get to 7, it would be the second most in any playoff run in NFL history.
Wow.
First is Terrell Davis, who basically got into the Hall of Fame because of a 2-year stretch where he was the most dominant player in the postseason with those Broncos teams. Terrell Davis in 1997 had 581 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
So far this postseason, to put that in perspective, Saquon Barkley for the Philadelphia Eagles, got to pull this up here, in the playoffs this year, rushing-wise, has 442 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. So he would need $140 and 3 touchdowns to match what Terrell Davis did back in 1997. And Davis did it in 4 games, so it would be the same number of games that they were able to accomplish that. To put it in context, just how dominant that run was by TD. But on that point, I think Saquon could establish himself as a first-ballot Hall of Famer with another big-time game.
I agree.
If the Eagles win this and it's because of Saquon, he will be viewed the way that Terrell Davis was. Where it's like, dude, that team won a Super Bowl because of him. And it's so incredibly rare that you can say that. Like we mentioned earlier today, the last time that I can remember a team having this kind of dominance from a running back where he was not only the best player, but also the most important guy on the entire team, it was Shaun Alexander for the Seahawks back in 2006. But you have to go even further than that if you want to talk about the winning team that had the best and most important player as a running back. I think you are talking about basically those 90s Broncos teams. It's probably Terrell Davis the last time that happened. Maybe you could argue the Baltimore Ravens in 2001, but that defense, I think, was more important than what they had out of Jamal Lewis. So I think you're probably going back to the 1999 Broncos, the last time that you saw a team that won the Super Bowl with their best and most important player being the running back.
Someone asked Jalen Hurts' touchdowns. So he's got 4 rushing touchdowns in the postseason, if I'm reading this correctly, and then 3 passing touchdowns.
Man. Those 4, I would have to imagine, I'd have to look this up, I would have to imagine they are getting close to the record for most rushing touchdowns in a single postseason stretch.
And people want to get rid of the tush push.
I was about to say, the only reason that number is really inflated is from that tush push, too, for Jalen Hurts.
Though.
Hey, man.
It's just a new version of what it used to be, right? Like, the tush push is what the fullback dive used to be. What's the difference?
Well, this is a quarterback, not a fullback. First off,
Okay.
come on, Brandon.
I mean, this is awkward. He called you on that one.
Yeah, what?
So how many rushing touchdowns do they have this postseason, Alex?
So Jalen Hurts. It just went away from me. So
Philly, Saquon has 5 so far.
yeah, so Jalen Hurts has.
Okay, yeah. So they are tied for the second most in a single postseason in NFL history with the 2022 Philadelphia Eagles, who also had 10 rushing touchdowns in the postseason.
Time to start talking about their offensive line.
Yeah, you think?
Damn.
Number 1 is the 1997 Denver Broncos, who had 12 rushing touchdowns in that postseason. So if they get 2 more, they will tie the Denver Broncos for the most rushing touchdowns in a single postseason in the history of the league.
Here's to hoping
Pretty
that
impressive, man.
here's to hoping Saquon gets 3.
Yeah, man.
Coming up in
We're
15
bringing
minutes.
a running back, boys.
Hurts has 9 total in his career in the playoffs, and that's the
absurd.
most quarterback rush touchdowns in the playoffs in NFL history.
It's amazing, man.
Tom Brady had 7.
They're all not the tush push, but they're quarterback sneaks.
I was going to say, why do I not remember that?
Brady was unbelievable on the quarterback sneak.
Yeah.
One of the best to ever do it prior to this last.
Steve Young had 8, and then Josh Allen had 7. Has 7.
All right, coming up next, we got to talk about the St. Louis Blues. They're saying the same things again. Are they going to come up with different answers this time around? We'll talk about that here on BK and Ferrario. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, the Blues are saying all of the same things that we've heard before. They're not getting off to a good enough start. They need to change their routines a little bit. They've got to be better in these specific situations where they're managing the puck. It's all the same things we've been hearing really for the last 3 years. And it begs the question, if we're asking the same questions, how do you come up with different answers? Because the personnel remains the same as what we've seen really for the entirety of the season, outside of Cam Fowler, who's been added to the team and has mostly been pretty solid for them. They've tried things where they're shaking things up. They're doing that again. Broberg is now, as of today, paired with Colton Parayko at morning skate. You've seen Bolduc in the past game, went up to that top line. They've switched him up. He's now going back down. They've got Matthew Joseph into the center of that third line. Like, they are making some changes personnel-wise, and sure, I've got no problems with that. It's hard for me to have any qualms when the team is not playing particularly well. Go ahead and try pulling all of the different levers that you can to get better results. But ultimately, it comes down to the guys that are available for you have to just play better. And I've got questions at this point as to whether or not the personnel on this team is capable of more than what we've seen. I think they look like a 500 club. And if you had told me coming into the season that that's what they were going to be, I probably would have said, yeah, that makes sense. And it's not the end of the world if you see positive returns from the young guys that get opportunities this year. And we have seen that. And Kyrou's taken a step forward. So, Alex, as you're watching this right now and you see them and you hear what Jim Montgomery is saying post-game and then what he said earlier today at Morning Skate, what do you make of it? And do you think there are answers that still remain out there?
I don't know if there's any answers that remain on this team. Like right now, the only thing you're doing is trying to figure out why Thomas and Booch have had their struggles in January, how to get them back to it. Defensively, like I know it's had a rough couple of goes these last couple of games. I think you're changing up the units because, frankly, it's probably just gotten a little stale. But there's no real answers that you're looking for from the defense because I think Fowler, Parayko, and Broberg are exactly what you expect them to be. The answers that you're waiting for aren't going to be here until the end of the season, and that's the younger players. And I think the answers that Jim Montgomery's trying to find now is how do we fix the mental side of the game for these guys? And this is a question that I'm going to ask Joe tonight on our pregame coverage because I really am curious. You guys remember at the beginning of the season when Drew Bannister had said, like, I think this team's falling back into some of their old habits. And we were like, okay, well, how do you fix those old habits? And for a time, it felt like they got there. I feel like this team's falling back into the old habits that they've had the last 3 years on the mental side of things. Because, yes, they're saying all the right things, but you're hearing the same conversation from the players after games of, well, we got to be ready to start the game on time. We've got to be ready to go from puck drop. We've got to be the aggressors. We've got to be fast. We've got to make the right decisions with the pucks. But then when the game happens, you're doing all of the things that you said you weren't going to do. And Jim Montgomery today at practice was saying, like, look, we're trying to exhaust all options. Do we switch up where we're doing our morning skates? Do we try and do things a little differently before the game of the coaches being in the locker room? I think what they're trying to figure out now is why is this team's mentality so fragile before games start, and how do we fix that? And honestly, if you can't fix that in season with Jim Montgomery when you're in a postseason run, I do really wonder if they look at this and say, maybe we have to make a drastic move. Yeah. And
that's easier said than done.
Totally, because when you use the reference point of the LA Kings, they didn't make a drastic move. Their drastic moves was being bad for 3 straight years and picking 5th overall, 10th overall, and 2nd overall.
Well, and they eventually did, and it was a mistake.
Yeah.
They traded for Pierre-Luc Dubois. It ended horribly, and they had to basically salary dump him. Yeah. Now it's worked out for him with Washington. Yeah. He has resurrected his career, but when he was with LA, it was a horrific move for them, right. And they're kind of paying the price for it.
Right. And, I mean, that was when they were at least somewhat in their competitive window to where they started to get the younger players. Like, the LA Kings had top talents in the draft coming in. I'm high on Dvorsky and Snuggerud, but those guys aren't 2nd overall picks and 5th overall picks. I always resort back to what we talked about when Jim Montgomery was hired. Why do you make this move? Because you know he's an incredible coach, and you take that X factor out of the conversation of what's going wrong with our team right now. You know you got a great coach. And now I think they're searching for answers as to why this team is so fragile when they can't implement what they're discussing in practices. I mean, Montgomery talks all the time how great their practice is. Why can't we take this and put it into this?
I remember we had a conversation when I was covering Mizzou basketball with Kim Anderson. And I just asked him, like, this was off the record at the time. It was like, hey, man, is this as good as your team can be? He's like, I can't ask for more than what we're getting right now. And what goes left unsaid there is, this is the talent that we have available. And they were hoping to upgrade. Like, it never worked out that they could upgrade it. But early on in the Commander scenario, he was like, hey, listen, this is what we've got. This is what it's going to be. You can't really expect anything more here because these are the players that we have available to us. I think we're getting close to that point with the Blues. And it's frustrating and it's disappointing. And I think nobody is more disappointed in that answer than the Blues are because they clearly thought this could be a playoff team this year. But I think what we're getting close to is a harsh reality setting in of this team's just not quite there yet.
Yeah.
That's not a huge deal. For me, at least, I think eventually they're going to get there. They're still a couple of players short right now. I did want to ask you one other thing, Alex, before we get out of here. There was a move today that the Blues decided to make. They have traded Scott Perunovich. He's going to the Islanders. They're getting a conditional 2026 fifth-round pick in return for him. Now, nationally, this move will be hyped up for the Islanders because some of the fancy numbers really like what Scott Perunovich has done when he's on the ice. I think this is a fine move by the Blues, and I think it's a smart move by the Islanders. I think both of those things can be true. There's no risk for the Islanders, and the Blues, you tried it. It didn't work. Let's move on. Alex, for you, as you're looking at this from the Blues perspective, do you have any fear of Scott Perunovich becoming the next Vince Dunn, the next Wallman?
No, I don't, because of his inability to shoot the puck. And maybe Patrick Waugh can unlock something that Craig Berube, Drew Bannister, and Jim Montgomery couldn't. That's hard for me to believe when you're talking about two coaches that are viewed as some of the best in the NHL. I've already seen a ton of fancy numbers and statistics saying like, oh, he's the next Jake Wallman because he's a offensively aggressive defenseman that just was only playing 11 minutes a night. Guys, Jake Wallman, when he was with the Blues, had 173 total shot attempts in one season, and he played 51 games and was averaging 14 minutes a night. Scott Perunovich, going off of this season to where I forget what the exact number was that he played. Let me pull it up. But he had a total shot attempts number of 26 this year. 26 total shot attempts this year in 24 games played and was averaging 14.37. Last year he was playing 15.16 a night and had a total shot attempts of 80. And I'm going.
That's not on goal. That's total shot attempts.
And that's why I'm picking total shot attempts, because Jake Wallman, every time he was on the ice, was trying to put shots on net. Whether they were blocked, missed the net, he was shooting. Scott Perunovich this year had 26 shot attempts. So 26 times he attempted to put the puck on net in 24 games and was averaging 30 more seconds a game than Jake Wallman. I'm not worried about it. If he goes to New York and New York's like, hey, shoot the puck, and he's like, oh my gosh, I need to shoot the puck, then yeah, I can see it happening. I mean, Vince Dunn basically said, I changed my view as an NHLer when I got traded because I realized that it's like, oh, damn, team doesn't want me. Now I got to go change how I play. It can absolutely happen. Scott Perunovich didn't just win the Hobey Baker because they gifted it out as a participation trophy.
It's not how that works.
No, it's not how that works. If it was, man, I'd be a all-pro basketball player these days. Basketball all-pro?
It was your
thing.
coach.
Totally coach. Well, and you know what? It was the team around me. It was the team around me. They weren't committed like I was. But Jake Wallman was a guy that shot the puck all the time. And it's not a coincidence that he goes to Detroit and scores 12 goals in a season, and this year he's got 28 points in 39 games. I don't see that happening for Scott Perunovich.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone, and I'm BK. Blues back in action this evening against the Vancouver Canucks. Pre-game coverage with Alex Ferrario begins at 5:30. It's an early start tonight, 6:30 puck drop, so be sure to stay tuned for that
T-Bone
at 101 ESPN. Coming up next, we're getting into some NFL quick hitters. I do think this is the conversation that a lot of people would like us to have. It's time for some ref talk here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues back in action tonight as they host the Vancouver Canucks. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5:30 with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. And then Joey will join Chris Carver for Puck Drop at 6:30. And the Blues made a trade earlier today as they traded defenseman Scott Perunovich to the New York Islanders in exchange for a conditional 5th-round pick in the 2026 NHL Draft. This Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning dealer.
All right, it's time. It's time to have the conversation that I know all of you on the text line have been having all day long. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You guys ready? Let's talk about the refs.
Finally.
They give the Chiefs another Super Bowl victory before the game even started?
Not a victory, but they at least gave them the appearance. At least that's what a lot of people are saying today. I just reject this notion, man. And I want to say up front, because I know me even talking about the refs is going to cause people to go bananas, because I'm a Chiefs fan. And so obviously my feelings on this are probably hindered by my bias. I wanted the Chiefs to win that football game yesterday. There were 2 significant calls that went in their favor yesterday. I do think it's worth having some context on what those calls meant for the Chiefs, though, and just how impactful they actually were. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. The 2 calls that I think most people are talking about today. One, the Xavier Worthy catch, which took them from the 20-yard line to the 3-yard line. Important note on this, there was no chance of it being an interception. That call was either going to be, it was incomplete or an interception. But if it was either of those 2 things, there was a penalty on the defense on that play, which would have given the Chiefs the ball at the 20-yard line, okay? It's also worth noting, at that point in the game, there was roughly 3 minutes left to play in the first half. The Chiefs ended up scoring 1 minute later. They scored a touchdown on that drive. The Bills then answered with a touchdown of their own right before halftime. Now, why is this important? Because had they called an incompletion or an interception on that play, the Chiefs, instead of having it at the 3, would have had it at the 20. They took a minute off the clock by having it at the 3-yard line. It's entirely possible the Chiefs end up scoring, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown, with basically no time remaining on the clock prior to halftime. That would have actually benefited the Chiefs, not the Bills. So that's that call, right? Because then the clock could potentially be drained out by the Chiefs prior to halftime. And again, the Bills did answer with a touchdown of their own. We didn't know that was going to happen, so I get that. But now we do with the proper context of 2020 hindsight. The 4th and 1 stop, or the bad spot, depending on your perspective of the play. It took place with 13 minutes remaining in the game. Let me say that one more time, because I think it's really important. There were 13 minutes left in the game after that 4th down stop. If that was on the final drive of the game, I totally get being up in arms, because at that point you feel like the referees took the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. Even if I were to concede, bad spot in that play. And I don't. I think both of those calls were legit 50-50 calls, and they happened to both go in the Chiefs' way, which obviously helps feed into this notion that the Chiefs have paid off the refs. But regardless.
They did, by the way.
If I concede that it was a really bad spot, Buffalo then had another chance on their final drive with 3.5 minutes left in the game to either kick a game-tying field goal and go to overtime, or to score the game-winning touchdown. The Chiefs had failed to step on their throat and really put them away because they settled for a field goal on their final meaningful drive of the football game. So the Bills got the ball back, man, in a spot where they can go then win the football game. 3.5 minutes to go with Josh Allen. He's played this great game for them. And guess what? They failed. They failed. Despite all of what we just talked about, the 2 big plays that apparently lost the Bills the game, the Bills were still in position to go win the football game. And they couldn't get it done. It had nothing to do with the refs in that spot. Had nothing to do with the officiating in that spot. It was them failing to meet the moment. So I'm sorry, guys. I'm not going to be sitting here today coming off of one of the best football games that we've seen in recent years. This was such a great game between 2 amazing quarterbacks, all-time quarterbacks, and a spot that we have been building up to for the past 5 years. There's so much history between these teams, not only on the field, but also the Bills traded the Chiefs the pick that they got Patrick Mahomes with. The Bills ended up missing out on Trent McDuffie because the Chiefs traded up ahead of the Bills in the draft. When the Bills wanted Trent McDuffie, Chiefs got him. The Bills had to sell for who? Kyer Elam, who played a huge role in that game yesterday, as did Trent McDuffie. And then this year, with the Worthy pick, Bills end up trading that to the Chiefs. Chiefs get Worthy. He has a great game yesterday. Bills trade back. They get Keon Coleman, who did nothing yesterday. So all of this has been building to this moment where it should be so celebrated. And instead, what we're talking about today is a bunch of nonsense. And it's so frustrating. Were they two legit 50-50 calls? Absolutely. And if they had called it, Josh Allen got the line to gain, and it was an incomplete pass to Xavier Worthy on the field, I don't think you could have overturned either of those calls either by going to the booth. So that's how I viewed this. You guys can yell at me if you think I'm stupid.
All right, good. One of the worst spots I've ever seen.
I get it.
It sounded like a Chiefs fan there.
Yeah, seriously.
Unbelievable.
You didn't even talk about the two. One, picking up the flag at the end of the game. Obviously, they had to make sure. And two, I don't know about you, but if the golden child Patrick Mahomes was in Josh Allen's shoes that last play, I would have saw roughing the passer, first down. Please add 15 seconds to the clock.
They didn't lay him down on a pillow.
Yeah.
That should have been
But you
roughing
know
the
what?
passer.
Taylor Swift had to get down and give Travis a kiss, so we had to make sure there was a red and gold confetti coming down from Arrowhead.
Yeah. I hate the refs.
Good job defending your cheating team, BK.
In all seriousness, what did you guys think of the calls? Because I do think there is a case to be made that he got the line to gain. I have no idea, and that's the problem. Is I genuinely do not know.
Here's the one for me that's kind of
clear call.
Been frustrating.
Clear view.
The Dalton Kincaid first down marker that they marked them 4th and inches or whatever.
We never got a good replay of that, though.
The one that I saw, which is ironic that Dave Portnoy tweeted it out, who was complaining about it. I mean, you saw where his knee hit the turf, and the ball was exactly where the officials walked to the line. Now, you're going a computerized yellow line, so obviously it's going to look bigger than what the first down marker was. But to me, it was pretty evident that it was a 50-50 call. And to BK's point, you call the play on the field, it's got to be obvious that you missed it.
Yeah.
And when it's the same thing as goalie interference, when we get upset about how goalie interference wasn't called, it was a good goal. Guess what? It's got to be obvious that it was goalie interference. Otherwise, the call's going to stand. Both plays were called turnover on downs or a 4th down to that Dalton Kincaid first one, and then they punted it away. Like that was the call on the field. So I actually thought if you're more frustrated, I was more frustrated with the Houston and Kansas City game officiating than I was with this one.
That's fair. I also think that one, like the Texans just weren't good enough, so it wasn't going to matter even if it did affect the game. Like somebody on the text line from the 314 said, guys, this is a dumb take. Even if it's 50-50, there's a clear challenge in the replay of the ball touched the turf. This is something that I'm not trying to talk down to anybody. The ball can touch the turf. It just can't move when it does. The ball touches the turf all the time, guys. It's just a matter of, do you maintain possession when it touches the turf? And again, this is one of those spots I don't know. I have no idea if Xavier Worthy or the defender caught that football. I have no clue. And that's the problem. They were both really unique situations, and they both happened to take place in a Chiefs game, which sucks. I wish that there was 0 important calls that the refs had to make in that game. But either way that both of those calls went, they were going to leave somebody up in arms because they were legitimate 50-50 propositions. I would also add this. Hey, Josh Allen, if you want the call in that spot, you've got to get more than half a yard. Like, you've got to be clear and obviously ahead of the first down marker, and he didn't. So if the Chiefs had been in that spot and they had the exact same situation, I know nobody's going to believe me, but I would have been saying the same thing. It's a 50-50 call, man. It was really, really close. And Chris Jones, his big ass is in front of the it's in front of the camera.
Just knows right where to put it.
The football,
Hey,
dude.
smart man.
Like the Chiefs got screwed in a game against the Patriots a couple of years ago because Chris Jones glanced against Tom Brady's helmet. Guess what? It's called. It's called every time. And the Chiefs ended up losing that game. Yeah. Chiefs ended up losing that game because it was a massive penalty. Dee Ford lined up like 6 inches too far across the line of scrimmage against the Patriots in that same game. And guess what? They called it. And it took off a potential game-sealing, game-winning interception. So these calls have gone against the Chiefs before. It happened against Brady. I can't complain about it because the Chiefs didn't take advantage of their opportunities. So I get it. It sucks. I hate that the refs did have clearly an impact on the game. I just think we've overstated the impacts that they had in that game yesterday. It mattered.
And it really
calls always matter.
Well, look, here's the thing too. You could sit there if you're sturdy on the fact of that they influenced the game. Here's the thing: Josh Allen had the opportunity to drive down the field, and he didn't.
Bingo.
There was no influence on those last 4 plays that Josh Allen turned the ball over.
All you want is for one guy, either one of them, whoever was behind at that point in time. All you want in these kinds of games is for one team to have the opportunity to go tie or win the football game in crunch time. And we got that
Josh
yesterday,
Allen
man.
didn't see the quarterback or the cornerback coming at him, and he got into duress. He threw the ball, and they didn't get the first down.
I've seen a lot of this as well, and this will be the last thing that I've got on this. I know a lot of people are mad at me right now. I totally get it. If I hated
on the cruise,
Chiefs,
man.
and I heard something like this, I would be feeling the exact same way. I promise you. Somebody from the 314 said, "Guys, if the other ref spots it, then it's a first down." This happens all the time in the NFL, guys. All the time. You've got 2 refs that see it a little bit differently, and they end up going with one or the other. You got to make a decision. And I believe that was the head linesman. That was the one that had the shorter marker.
Yep.
He's the one that gets the precedent. It's like if you have an umpire and you've got the somebody else that's down the first baseline, like somebody eventually has to make a call, right? In Major League Baseball, there are times where it's just, you don't know. You're not totally sure if it went over that first base or not. And it ends up being a huge call, and there's just no way of knowing with any certainty if you got the call right or not. That's what happened yesterday. And it was 2 calls. They went in favor of the Chiefs. Maybe next time it'll go in favor of the Bills. Probably not, because Chiefs paid them off. The Rewind is next. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
That 101 ESPN app is free to enjoy. It is super easy to use, and it is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Alex, we have had a lot of conversations today, specifically about the NFL and the St. Louis Blues. Blues back in action this evening against the Canucks. Pregame coverage for that one starts at 5:30. Puck drop will begin at 6:30. Again, Alex has your pregame at 5:30 right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. They have switched up the line combinations a bit today, Alex. They are going with Neighbors, Thomas, and Booch once again. They've got Saad, Joseph, and Bolduc as the third line. That WTF line is reunited on that fourth line, and then Sonny is going to be the extra today. They do have Fowler with Falk. They're skating together now. And then Broberg and Parayko, looks like Benner is going to be in net. What are you looking for tonight for the Blues to potentially get off this rough stretch of games that they've had over their last four?
Well, it's going to be the top guys again. I'm looking at Thomas Buchnevich. Frankly, you are looking at the start, which I know can sound cliche at times, but it's what's plagued them these last couple of games. And then I am kind of curious what this defense is going to look like. I get the Broberg and Parayko because Parayko and Fowler have had a couple of rough games, so you kind of wonder if it's getting a little stale. I don't mind Fowler and Falk together, but I don't know what that looks like in terms of zone exits and defending their own zone. So those are just some areas. And then honestly, you're taking advantage of a wounded animal right now in the Vancouver Canucks. I know they won recently, but it's a team that's not playing really inspired hockey and frankly has a lot of drama going on. So you got to take advantage of this one. If you lose this one, it's going to be really hard to look at the rest of this stretch going into the deadline.
I'm excited to see what it looks like with Neighbors back on that Booch and Thomas line, because I was at the game Saturday and they had Bolduc on that line, and I thought Bolduc was good. You know, I didn't see any issues to where they would have to break up that line. They didn't get off to a great start. The first 5 minutes wasn't great, but I saw no reason to pull Bolduc off that line. So I'm curious to know what it looks like tonight now that they're going right back to Jake Neighbors there. One
thing that Monty did mention, this was when they were doing Saad and Neighbors. He said, I like to have two different options in terms of speed versus size. And obviously a Rick Tocchet coach team likes to play with physicality. They've got big defensemen. So maybe he just wants more physicality on that line instead of keeping Bolduc up there.
Right, that's the Blues side of things in the NFL. We saw the Chiefs win yesterday. We saw the Eagles win yesterday. We had a ton of breakdown on that throughout the course of the day today. We also gave you our extended thoughts on, the referees in our past segments.
One more than the other two.
One did.
Yeah.
Check that out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com, the free 101 ESPN app, or on YouTube as always at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Kudos to T-Bone for playing hurt today. He's going to go home and take a little 3-hour nap ski whenever he gets home.
Nobody text me till 7.
Alex will have your pregame coverage for Blues versus Canucks at 5:30. I will be back in tomorrow. I've got one more day in me, and then I am officially going on vacation. Knock on wood. Hopefully this time it actually happens on a Wednesday. So we'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.